Okay. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I played a little of this... Oh, there we go. I played a little of this yesterday, and I listened to a short story while I played this game, and I like doing that. I didn't have to talk at all. It was awesome. So I am going to listen to at least 2 short stories today. First one is going to be another one by Cordwainer Smith called Think Blue, Count 2. And then that should run for about an hour and 15 minutes. And then the next one is going to be the short story by Daniel Keyes called Flowers for Algernon. Not the book, the short story, and that runs about an hour. So, I don't know, enjoy. I'm going to basically be quiet, and I'm going to play these short stories. Yeah. I hope you enjoy. Yeah. Anyways.
Think blue, count 2. 1. Before the great ships whispered between the stars by means of planiforming, people had to fly from star to star with immense sails. Huge films assorted in space on long, rigid, cold-proof rigging.
Whoa.
A small spaceboat provided room for a sailor to handle the sails, check the course, and watch the passengers who were sealed like knots in immense threads in their little adiabatic pods which trailed behind the ship. The passengers knew nothing except for going to sleep on Earth and waking up on a strange new world 40, 50, or 200 years later. This was a primitive way to do it, but it worked. On such a ship, Helen America had followed Mr. Gray no more. On such ships, the scanners retained their ancient authority over space. 200 planets and more were settled in this fashion, including old North Australia, destined to be the treasure house of them all. The immigration port was a series of low, square buildings, nothing like Earthport, which towers above the clouds like a frozen nuclear explosion. Emigration Port is dour, drab, dreary, and efficient. The walls are black-red, like old blood, merely because they are cheaper to heat that way. The rockets are ugly and simple. The rocket pits as inglorious as machine shops. Earth has a few show places to tell visitors about. Emigration Port is not one of them. The people who work there get the privilege of real work and secure professional honors. The people who go there become unconscious very soon. What they remember about Earth is a little room like a hospital room, a little bed, some music, some talk, the sleep, and, perhaps, the cold. From Emigration Port, they go to their pods, sealed in. The pods go to the rockets and these to the sailing ship. That's the old way of doing it. The new way is better. All a person does now is visit the pleasant lounge or play a game of cards or eat a meal or two. All he needs is half the wealth of a planet or a couple hundred years seniority marked excellent without a single break. The photonic sails were different. Everyone took chances. A young man, bright of skin and hair, merry at heart, set out for a new world. An older man, his hair touched with gray, went with him. So too did 30,000 others. And also, the most beautiful girl on Earth. Earth could have kept her, but the new worlds needed her. She had to go. She went by light sail ship, and she had to cross space. Space, where the danger always waits. Space sometimes commands strange tools to its uses. The screams of a beautiful child, the laminated brain of a long-dead mouse, the heartbroken weeping of a computer. Most space offers no respite, no relay, no rescue, no repair. All dangers must be anticipated, otherwise they become mortal. And the greatest of all hazards is the risk of man himself. "She's beautiful," said the first technician. "She's just a child," said the second. "She won't look like much of a child when they're 200 years out," said the first. "But she is a child," said the second, smiling. "A beautiful doll with blue eyes, just going tiptoe into the beginnings of grown-up life." He sighed. "She'll be frozen," said the first. "Not all the time. said the second. Sometimes they wake up. They have to wake up. The machines defreeze them. You remember the crimes on the old 22? Nice people, but the wrong combinations. And everything went wrong. Dirtily, brutally wrong. They both remembered old 22. The Hell ship had drifted between the stars for a long time before its beacon brought rescue. Rescue was much too late. The ship was in immaculate condition. The sails were set at a correct angle. The thousands of frozen sleepers strung out behind the ship in their one-body adiabatic pods would have been in excellent condition, but they had merely been left in open space too long, and most of them had spoiled. The inside of the ship, there was the trouble. The sailor had failed or died.
Oh well.
The reserve passengers had been awakened. They did not get on well with one another, or else they got on too horribly well in the wrong way. Out between the stars, encased only by a frail, limited cabin, they had invented new crimes and committed them upon each other. Crimes which a million years of Earth's old wickedness had never brought to the surface of man before. The investigators of Old 22 had become very sick, reconstructing the events that followed the awakening of the reserve crew. Two of them had asked for blanking, and had obviously retired from service. The two technicians knew all about Old 22 as they watched the 15-year-old woman sleeping on the table. Was she a woman? Was she a girl? What would happen to her if she did wake up on the flight? She breathed delicately. The two technicians looked across her figure at one another, and then the first one said, "We'd better call the psychological guard. It's a job for him." "You can try," said the second. The psychological guard, a man whose number name ended in the digits Tyga Bayless, came cheerfully into the room a half hour later. He was a dreamy-looking old man, sharp and alert, probably in his fourth rejuvenation. He looked at the beautiful girl on the table and inhaled sharply. "What's this for? A ship?" "No," said the first technician. "It's a beauty contest." "Don't be a fool," said the psychological guard. "You mean they are really sending that beautiful child into the up and out?" "It's stock," said the second technician. "The people out on Wereld Shimmering are running dreadfully ugly, and they flashed a sign to the big blink that they had to have better-looking people. The instrumentality is doing right by them. All the people on this ship are handsome or beautiful." "If she's that precious, why don't they freeze her and put her in a pod? That way she would either get there or she would not. A face as pretty as that," said Tyga Bayless, "could start trouble anywhere, let alone a ship. What's her name number?" "On the board there," said the first technician. "It's all on the board there. You'll want the others too. They're listed too and ready to go on the board." "Veezy Koozy," read the psychological guard, saying the words aloud. "Or 5-6. That's a silly name, but it's rather cute." With one last look back at the sleeping girl, he bent to his work of reading the case histories of the people added to the reserve crew. Within 10 lines, he saw why the girl was being kept ready for emergencies, instead of sleeping the whole trip through. She had a daughter potential of 999.999, meaning that any normal adult of either sex could and would accept her as a daughter after a few minutes of relationship. She had no skill in herself, no learning, no trained capacities, but she could remotivate almost anyone older than herself, and she showed a probability of making that remotivated person put up a gigantic fight for life, for her sake, and secondarily, the adopters. That was all, but it was special enough to put her in the cabin. She had tested out into the literal truth of the ancient poetic scrap, the fairest of the daughters of old Earth. When Tyga Bayless finished taking his notes from the records, the working time was almost over. The technicians had not interrupted him. He turned around to look one last time at the lovely girl. She was gone. The second technician had left, and the first was cleaning his hands. "You haven't frozen her," cried Tyga Bayless. I'll have to fix her too if the safeguard is to work. Of course you do, said the first technician. We've left you 2 minutes for it. You give me 2 minutes, said the first technician, to protect a trip of 450 years? Do you need more? Said the technician. And it was not even a question, except in form. Do I? Said Tiger Bayless. He broke into a smile. No, I don't. That girl will be safe long after I am dead. When do you die? Said the technician, socially. 73 years, 2 months, 4 days, said Tiger Bayless, agreeably. I'm a fourth and last. I thought so, said the technician. You're smart. Nobody starts off that way. We all learn. I'm sure you'll take care of that girl. They left the laboratory together and ascended to the surface and the cool, restful night of Earth. 2. Late the next day, Tiger Bayless came in, very cheerful indeed. In his left hand, he held a drama spool, full commercial size. In his right hand, there was a black plastic cube with shimmering silver contact points gleaming on its sides. The 2 technicians greeted him politely. The psychological guard could not hide his excitement and his pleasure. I've got that beautiful child taken care of. The way she is going to be fixed, she'll keep her daughter potential, but it's going to be a lot closer to 1000.00 than it was with all those 9s. I've used a mouse brain. If it's frozen, said the first technician, we won't be able to put it in the computer. It will have to go forward with the emergency stores. His brain isn't frozen, said Tiger Bayless indignantly. It's been laminated. We stiffened it with celluprime, and then we veneered it down, about 7,000 layers. Each one has plastic of at least 2 molecular thicknesses. This mouse can't spoil. As a matter of fact, this mouse is going to go on thinking forever. He won't think much unless we put the voltage on him, but he'll think. And he can't spoil. This is ceramic plastic, and it would take a major weapon to break it. The contacts, said the second technician. They don't go through, said Tiger Bayless. This mouse is tuned into that girl's personality up to 1,000 meters. You can put him anywhere in the ship. The case has been hardened. The contacts are just attached on the outside. They feed to nickel-steel counterpart contacts on the inside. I told you this mouse is going to be thinking when the last human being on the last known planet is dead. And it's going to be thinking about that girl forever. Forever is an awfully long time, said the first technician with a shiver. We only need a safety period of 2,000 years. The girl herself would spoil in less than 1,000 years if anything did go wrong. Never you mind, said Tiger Bayless. That girl is going to be guarded whether she is spoiled or not. He spoke to the cube. You're going along with VZ, fellow, and if she is an old 22, you'll turn the whole thing into a total garden frolic, complete with ice cream and hymns to the west wind. Tiger Bayless looked up at the other men and said, quite unnecessarily, he can't hear me. Of course not, said the first technician, very dryly. They all looked at the cube. It was a beautiful piece of engineering. The psychological guard had reason to be proud of it. Do you need the mouse anymore? Said the first technician. Yes, said Tiger Bayless. 1/3 of a millisecond at 40 megadynes. I want him to get her whole life printed on his left cortical lobe, particularly her screams. She screamed badly at 10 months. Something she got in her mouth. She screamed at 10 when she thought the air had stopped in her drop shaft. It hadn't, or she wouldn't be here. They're in her record. I want the mouse to have those screams. And she had a pair of red shoes for her 4th birthday. Give me the full 2 minutes with her. I've printed the key on the complete series of Marcia and the Moon Men. That was the best box drama for teenage girls that they ran last year. VZ saw it. This time she'll see it again, but the mouse will be tied in. She won't have the chance of a snowball in hell of forgetting it, said the first technician. What was that? Huh? Said Tiger Bayless. What was that you just said? That at the end? Are you deaf? No, said the technician huffily. I just didn't understand what you meant. I said that she would not have the chance of a snowball in hell of forgetting it. That's what I thought you said, replied the technician. What is a snowball? What is hell? What sort of chances do they make? The second technician interrupted eagerly. I know, he explained. Snowballs are ice formations on Neptune. Hell is a planet out near Khufu 7. I don't know how anybody would get them together. Tyga Bayless looked at them with the weary amazement of the very old. He did not feel like explaining, so he said gently, "Let's leave the literature till another time. All I meant was, Veezy will be safe when she's cued into this mouse. The mouse will outlast her and everybody else, and no teenage girl is going to forget Marcia and the Moon Men. Not when she saw every single episode twice over. This girl did. She's not going to render the other passengers ineffectual. That wouldn't help," said the first technician. "Not a bit," said Tyga Bayless. "Give me those strengths again," said the first technician. "Mouse, 1/3 millisecond at 40 megadynes. "They'll hear that way beyond the moon," said the technician. "You can't put that sort of stuff into people's heads without a permit. Do you want us to get a special permit from the instrumentality? For 1/3 of a millisecond?" The two men faced each other for a moment. Then the technician began creasing his forehead. His mouth began to smile, and they both laughed.
Nope, of course.
The second technician did not understand it, and Tyga Bayless said to him, "I'm putting the girl's whole lifetime into 1/3 of a millisecond at top power. It will drain over into the mouse brain inside this cube. What is the normal human reaction within 1/3 millisecond?" 15 milliseconds. The second technician started to speak and stopped himself. "That's right," said Tyga Bayless. "People don't get anything at all in less than 15 milliseconds. This mouse isn't only veneered and laminated, he's fast. The lamination is faster than his own synapses ever were. Bring on the girl." The first technician had already gone to get her. The second technician turned back for one more question. "Is the mouse dead?" "No. Yes, of course not. What do you mean? Who knows?" said Tyga Bayless, all in one breath. The younger man stared, but the couch with the beautiful girl had already rolled into the room. Her skin had chilled down from pink to ivory, and her respiration was no longer visible to the naked eye. But she was still beautiful. The deep freezing had not yet begun. The first technician began to whistle. "Mouse, 40 megadynes, 1/3 of a millisecond. Girl, output maximum, same time. Girl input, 2 minutes. What volume?" "Anything," said Tyga Bayless. "Anything, whatever you use for deep personality engraving."
Ooh.
"Set," said the technician. "Take the cube," said Tyga Bayless. The technician took it and fitted it into the coffin-like box near the girl's head. "Goodbye, immortal mouse," said Tyga Bayless. "Think about the beautiful girl when I am dead, and don't get too tired of Marcia and the Moon Men when you've seen it for a million years." "Record," said the second technician. He took it from Tyga Bayless and put it into a standard drama shower, but one with output cables heavier than any home had ever installed. "Do you have a code word?" said the first technician. "It's a little poem," said Tyga Bayless. He reached in his pocket. "Don't read it aloud. If any of us misspoke a word, there is a chance she might hear it, and it would heterodyne the relationship between her and the laminated mouse." The two looked at a scrap of paper. In clear, archaic writing, there appeared the lines, "Lady, if a man tries to bother you, you can think blue, count 2, and look for a red shoe." The technicians laughed warmly. "That'll do it," said the first technician. Tyga Bayless gave them an embarrassed smile of thanks. "Turn them both on," he said. "Goodbye, girl," he murmured to himself. "Goodbye, mouse. Maybe I'll see you in 74 years. The room flashed with a kind of invisible light inside their heads. In moon orbit, a navigator wondered about his mother's red shoes. 2 million people on Earth started to count 1, 2, and then wondered why they had done so. A bright young parakeet in an orbital ship began reciting the whole verse and baffled the crew as to what the meaning might be. Apart from this, there were no side effects. The girl in the coffin arched her body with terrible strain. The electrodes had scorched the skin at her temples. The scars stood bright red against the chilled, fresh skin of the girl. The cube showed no sign from the dead, live, dead mouse. While the second technician put ointment on VZ's scars, Tiger Bayless put on a headset and touched the terminals of the cube very gently, without moving it from the snap-in position it held in the coffin-shaped box. He nodded, satisfied. He stepped back. "You're sure the girl got it? We'll read it back before she goes to deep freeze. Marcia and the Moon Men. What? Can't miss it," said the first technician. "I'll let you know if there's anything missing. There won't be." Tiger Bayless took one last look at the lovely, lovely girl. 73 years, 2 months, 3 days, he thought to himself. And she, beyond Earth rules, may be awarded 1,000 years. And the mouse brain has got 1,000,000 years. VZ never knew any of them. Neither the first technician, nor the second technician, nor Tiger Bayless, the psychological guard. To the day of her death, she knew that Marcia and the Moon Men had included the most wonderful blue lights, the hypnotic count of 1, 2, 1, 2, and the prettiest red shoes that any girl had seen on or off Earth. 326 years later, she had to wake up. Her box had opened. Her body ached in every muscle and nerve. The ship was screaming emergency, and she had to get up. She wanted to sleep, or to die. The ship kept screaming. She had to get up. She lifted an arm to the edge of her coffin bed. She had practiced getting in and out of the bed in the long training period before they sent her underground to be hypnotized and frozen. She knew just what to reach for, just what to expect. She pulled herself over on her side. She opened her eyes. The lights were yellow and strong. She closed her eyes again. This time a voice sounded from somewhere near her. It seemed to be saying, "Take the straw in your mouth." VZ groaned. The voice kept on saying things. Something scratchy pressed against her mouth. She opened her eyes. The outline of a human head had come between her and the light. She squinted, trying to see if it might be one more of the doctors. No, this was the ship. The face came into focus. It was the face of a very handsome and very young man. His eyes looked into hers. She had never seen anyone who was both handsome and sympathetic, quite the way that he was. She tried to see him clearly and found herself beginning to smile. The drinking tube thrust past her lips and teeth. Automatically, she sucked at it. The fluid was something like soup, but it had a medicinal taste, too. The face had a voice. "Wake up," he said. "Wake up. It doesn't do any good to hold back now. You need some exercise as soon as you can manage it." She let the tube slip from her mouth and gasped. "Who are you?" "Trace," he said. "And that's Talatashar over there. We've been up for 2 months rescuing the robots. We need your help." "Help?" she murmured. "My help?" Trace's face wrinkled and crinkled in a delightful grin. "Well, we sort of needed you. We really do need a third mind to watch the robots when we think we've fixed them. And besides, we're lonely. Talatashar and I aren't much company to each other. We looked over the list of reserve crew and we decided to wake you." He reached out a friendly hand to her. When she sat up, she saw the other man, Talatashar. She immediately recoiled. She had never seen anyone so ugly. His hair was gray and cropped. Piggy little eyes peered out of eye sockets which looked flooded with fat. His cheeks hung down in monstrous jowls on either side. On top of all that, his face was lopsided. One side seemed wide awake, but the other was twisted in an endless spasm which looked like agony. She could not help putting her hand to her mouth, and it was with the back of her hand against her lips that she spoke. I thought everybody on this ship was supposed to be handsome." One side of Talatashar's face smiled at her, while the other half stayed with its expression of frozen hurt. "We were," his voice rumbled, and it was not of itself an unpleasant voice. "We all were. Some of us always get spoiled in the freezing. It will take you a while to get used to me." He laughed grimly. "It took me a while to get used to me. In 2 months I've managed. Pleased to meet you. Maybe you'll be pleased to meet me after a while. What do you think of that, eh, Trace?" "What?" said Trace, who had watched them both with a friendly worry. The girl, so tactful, the direct diplomacy of the very young. "Was I handsome?" she said. "No, say I. What is she anyhow?" Trace turned to her. "Let me help you sit," he said. She sat up on the edge of her box.
Nice.
Wordlessly, he passed the skin of fluid to her with its drinking tube, and she went back to sucking her broth. Her eyes peered up at the two men like the eyes of a small child. They were as innocent and troubled as the eyes of a kitten which has met worry for the first time. "What are you?" said Trace. She took her lips away from the tube for a moment. "A girl," she said. Half of Talatashar's face smiled a sophisticated smile. The other half moved a little with muscular drag, but expressed nothing. "We see that," said he grimly. "He means," said Trace conciliatorily, "what have you been trained for?" She took her mouth away again. Nothing, said she. The men laughed, both of them. First, Trace laughed with all the evil in the world in his voice. Then Talatashar laughed, and he was too young to laugh his own way. His laughter, too, was cruel. There was something masculine, mysterious, threatening, and secret in it, as though he knew all about things which girls could find out only at the cost of pain and humiliation. He was as alien for the moment as men have always been from women, filled with secret motives and concealed desires, driven by bright, sharp thoughts which women neither had nor wished to have, perhaps more than his body had spoiled. There was nothing in Veezy's own life to make her fear that laugh, but the instinctive reaction of 1,000,000 years of womanhood behind her was to disregard the evil, go on the alert for more trouble, and hope for the best at the moment. She knew from books and tapes all about sex. This laugh had nothing to do with babies or with love. There was contempt and power and cruelty in it. The cruelty of men who are cruel merely because they are men. For an instant, she hated both of them, but she was not alarmed enough to set off the trigger of the protective devices which the psychological guard had built into her mind itself. Instead, she looked down the cabin, 10 meters long and 4 meters wide. This was home now, perhaps forever. There were sleepers somewhere, but she did not see their boxes. All she had was this small space and the two men. Trace with his warm smile, his nice voice, his interesting gray-blue eyes, and Talatashar with his ruined face, and their laughter. That wretchedly mysterious masculine laughter, hostile and laughing act in its undertones. Life's life, she thought, and I must live it here. Talatashar, who had finished laughing, now spoke in a very different voice. There will be times for the fun and games later. First, we have to get the work done. The photonic sails aren't picking up enough starlight to get us anywhere. The mainsail is ripped by a meteor. We can't repair it, not when it's 20 miles across, so we have to jury-rig the ship. That's the right old word. How does it work? Asked Veezy, sadly, not much interested in her own question. The aches and pains of the long freeze were beginning to bedevil her. Talatashar said, "It's simple. The sails are coated. We were put into orbit by rockets. The pressure of light is bigger on one side than on the other. With some pressure on one side and virtually no pressure on the other, the ship has to go somewhere. Interstellar matter is very fine and does not give us enough drag to slow us down. The sails pull away from the brightest source of light at any time. For the first 80 years, it was the sun. Then we began trying to get both the sun and some bright patches of light behind it. Now we have more light coming at us than we want, and we will be pulled away from our destination if we do not point the blind side of the sails at the goal and the pushing sides at the next best source. The sailor died, for some reason we can't figure out. The ship's automatic mechanism woke us up, and the navigation board explained the situation to us. Here we are. We have to fix the robots. But what's the matter with them? Why don't they do it themselves? Why do they have to wake up people? They're supposed to be so smart. She particularly wondered, why did they have to wake up me? But she suspected the answer, that the men had done it, not the robots, and she did not want to make them say it. She still remembered how their masculine laughter had turned ugly. The robots weren't programmed to tear up sails, only to fix them. We've got to condition them to accept the damage that we want to leave, and to go ahead with the new work which we are adding. Could I have something to eat? Asked Veezy. Let me get it, cried Trace. Why not? Said Talatashar. While she ate, they went over the proposed work in detail, the three of them talking it out calmly. Veezy felt more relaxed. She had the sensation that they were taking her in as a partner. By the time they completed their work schedules, they were sure it would take between 35 and 42 normal days to get the sails stiffened and rehung. The robots did the outside work, but the sails were 70,000 miles long by 20,000 miles wide. 42 days. The work was not 42 days at all. It was 1 year and 3 days before they finished. The relationships in the cabin had not changed much. Talatashar left her alone except to make ugly remarks. Nothing he had found in the medicine cabinet had made him look any better, but some of the things drugged him so that he slept long and well.
Useless.
Trace had long since become her sweetheart, but it was such an innocent romance that it might have been conducted on grass, under elms, at the edge of an earthside silky river. Once she had found them fighting and had exclaimed, "Stop it! Stop it! You can't!" When they did stop hitting each other, she said wonderingly, "I thought you couldn't. Those boxes, those safeguards, those things they put in with us." And Talatashar said, in a voice of infinite ugliness and finality, "That's what they thought. I threw those things out of the ship months ago. Don't want them around." The effect on Trace was dramatic, as bad as if he had walked into one of the ancient unselfing grounds unaware. He stood utterly still, his eyes wide and his voice filled with fear, when at last he did speak. "So, that's why we fought. You mean the boxes? They're gone, all right." "But," gasped Trace, "each was protected by each one's box. We were all protected from ourselves. God help us all." "What is God?" said Talatashar. "Never mind. It's an old word. I heard it from a robot. But what are we going to do? What are you going to do?" said he accusingly to Talatashar. "Me?" said Talatashar. "I'm doing nothing. Nothing has happened." The working side of his face twisted in a hideous smile. Veezy watched both of them. She did not understand it, but she feared it, that unspecific danger. Talatashar gave them his ugly masculine laugh, but this time Trace did not join him. He stared open-mouthed at the other man. Talatashar put on a show of courage and indifference. "Shift's up," he said, "and I'm turning in." Veezy nodded and tried to say goodnight, but no words came. She was frightened and inquisitive. Of the two, feeling inquisitive was worse. There were 30-odd thousand people all around her, but only these two were alive and present. They knew something which she did not know. Talatashar made a brave show of it by bidding her. "Fix up something special for the big eating tomorrow. Mind you do it, girl." He climbed into the wall. When Veezy turned toward Trace, it was he who fell into her arms. "I'm frightened," he said. "We can face anything in space, but we can't face us. I'm beginning to think that the sailor killed himself. His psychological guard broke down too, and now we're all alone with just us." Veezy looked instinctively around the cabin. "It's all the same as before, just the three of us and this little room, and the up and out outside. Don't you see it, darling? He grabbed her by the shoulders. The little boxes protected us from ourselves, and now there aren't any. We are helpless. There isn't anything here to protect us from us. What hurts man like man? What kills people like people? What danger to us could be more terrible than ourselves? She tried to pull away. It's not that bad. Without answering, he pulled her to him. He began tearing at her clothes. The jacket and shorts, like his own, were omni-textile and fitted tight. She fought him off, but she was not the least bit frightened. She was sorry for him. And at this moment, the only thing that worried her was that Talatashar might wake up and try to help her. That would be too much. Trace was not hard to stop. She got him to sit down, and they drifted into the big chair together. His face was as tear-stained as her own. That night, they did not make love. In whispers, in gasps, he told her the story of Old 22. He told her that people poured out among the stars, and that the ancient things inside people woke up, so that the deeps of their minds were more terrible than the blackest depth of space. Space never committed crimes, it just killed. Nature could transmit death, but only man could carry crime from world to world. Without the boxes, they looked into the bottomless depths of their own unknown selves. She did not really understand, but she tried as well as she possibly could. He went to sleep. It was long after his shift should have ended, murmuring over and over again, "Veezy, Veezy, protect me from me. What can I do now, so that I won't do something terrible later on? What can I do? Now I'm afraid of me, Veezy, and afraid of Old 22. Veezy, Veezy, you've got to save me from me. What can I do now? She had no answer, and after he slept, she slept. The yellow lights burned brightly on them both. The robot board, reading that no human being was in the on position, assumed complete control of the ship and sails. Talatashar woke them in the morning. No one that day, nor any of the succeeding days, said anything about the boxes. There was nothing to say. But the two men watched each other like unrelated beasts, and Veezy herself began watching them in turn. Something wrong and vital had come into the room, some exuberance of life which she had never known existed. It did not smell, she could not see it. She could not reach it with her fingers. It was something real, nevertheless. Perhaps it was what people once called danger. She tried to be particularly friendly to both the men. It made the feeling diminish within her. But Trace became surly and jealous, and Talatashar smiled his untruthful, lopsided smile. 4. Danger came to them by surprise. Talatashar's hands were on her, pulling her out of her own sleeping box. She tried to fight, but he was as remorseless as an engine. He pulled her free, turned her around, and let her float in the air. She would not touch the floor for a minute or two, and he obviously counted on getting control of her again. As she twisted in the air, wondering what had happened, she saw Trace's eyes rolling as they followed her movement. Only a fraction of a second later did she realize that she saw Trace too. He was tied up with emergency wire, and the wire which bound him was tied to one of the stanchions in the wall. He was more helpless than she. A cold, deep fear came upon her. Is this a crime? She whispered to the empty air. Is this what crime is? What you are doing to me? Talatashar did not answer her, but his hands took a firm, terrible grip on her shoulders. He turned her around. She slapped at him. He slapped her back, hitting so hard that her jaw felt like a wound. She had hurt herself accidentally a few times. The doctor robots had always hurried to her aid, but no other human being had ever hurt her. Hurting people? Why, that wasn't done. Except for the games of men. It wasn't done. It couldn't happen. It did. All in a rush, she remembered what Trace had told her about Old 22. and about what happened to people when they lost their own outsides in space and began making up evil from the people insides, which, after 1,000,000 and more years of becoming human, still followed them everywhere, even into space itself. This was crime come back to man. She managed to say it to Talatashar. "You are going to commit crimes? On this ship? With me?" His expression was hard to read, with half of his face frozen in a perpetual rictus of unfulfilled laughter. They were facing each other now. Her face was feverish from the pain of his slap, but the good side of his face showed no corresponding imprint of pain from having been struck by her. It showed nothing but strength, alertness, and a kind of attunement which was utterly and unimaginably wrong. At last he answered her, and it was as if he wandered among the wonders of his own soul. "I'm going to do what I please. What I please. Do you understand?" "Why don't you just ask us?" she managed to say. "Trace and I will do anything you want. We're all alone in this little ship millions of miles from nowhere. Why shouldn't we do what you want? Let him go and talk to me. We'll do what you want. Anything. You have rights too." His laugh was close to a crazy scream. He put his face close to her and hissed at her so sharply that droplets of his spittle sprayed against her cheek and ear. "I don't want rights," he shouted at her. "I don't want what's mine. I don't want to do right. Do you think I haven't heard the two of you night after night making soft, loving sounds when the cabin has gone dark? Why do you think I threw the cubes out of the ship? Why do you think I needed power?" "I don't know," she said, sadly and meekly. She had not given up hope. As long as he was talking, he might talk himself out and become reasonable again. She had heard of robots blowing their circuits, so that they had to be hunted down by other robots. But she had never thought that it might happen to people, too. Talatashar groaned. The history of man was in his groan. The anger at life, which promises so much and gives so little, and despair about time, which tricks man while it shapes him. He sat back on the air and let himself drift toward the floor of the cabin, where the magnetic carpeting drew the silky iron filaments in their clothing. "You're thinking he'll get over this, aren't you?" said he, speaking of himself. She nodded. "You're thinking he'll get reasonable and let both of us alone, aren't you?" She nodded again. "You're thinking, Talatashar, he'll get well when we arrive at Werreld Shimmering, and the doctors will fix his face, and then we'll all be happy again. That's what you're thinking, isn't it?" She still nodded. Behind her, she heard Trace give a loud groan against his gag, but she did not dare take her eyes off Talatashar and his spoiled, horrible face. "Well, it won't be that way, Veezy," he said. The finality in his voice was almost calm. "Veezy, you're not going to get there. I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to do things to you that no one ever did in space before, and then I'm going to throw your body out the disposal door. But I'll let Trace watch it all before I kill him too. And then, do you know what I'll do?" Some strange emotion, it was probably fear, began tightening the muscles in her throat. Her mouth had become dry. She barely managed to croak. "No, I don't know what you'll do then." Talatashar looked as though he were staring inward. "I don't either," said he. "Except that it's not something I want to do. I don't want to do it at all. It's cruel and messy, and when I get through, I won't have you and him to talk to. But this is something I have to do. It's justice in a strange way. You've got to die because you're bad, and I'm bad too. But if you die, I won't be so bad." He looked up at her brightly, almost as though he were normal. "Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you understand any of it?" "No, no, no," Veezy stammered, but she could not help it. Talatashar stared not at her, but at the invisible face of his crime to come, and said almost cheerfully, You might as well understand. It's you who will die for it, and then him. Long ago you did me a wrong, a dirty, intolerable wrong. It wasn't the you who's sitting here. You're not big enough or smart enough to do anything as awful as the things that were done to me. It wasn't this you who did it. It was the real, true you instead. And now you are going to be cut and burned and choked and brought back with medicines and cut and choked and hurt again, as long as your body can stand it. And when your body stops, I'm going to put on an emergency suit and shove your dead body out into space with him. He can go out alive, for all I care. Without a suit, he'll last 2 gasps. And then, part of my justice will be done. That's what people have called crime. It's just justice. Private justice that comes out of the deep insides of man. Do you understand, VZ? She nodded. She shook her head. She nodded again. She didn't know how to respond. And then there are more things which I'll have to do. He went on with a sort of purr. Do you know what there is outside this ship waiting for my crime? She shook her head, and so he answered himself. There are 30,000 people following in their pods behind this ship. I'll pull them in 2 and 2, and I will get young girls. The others I'll throw loose in space. And with the girls, I'll find out what it is. What it is I've always had to do and never knew. Never knew, VZ, till I found myself out in space with you. His voice almost went dreamy as he lost himself in his own thoughts. The twisted side of his face showed its endless laugh, but the mobile side looked thoughtful and melancholy, so that she felt there was something inside him which might be understood, if only she had the quickness and the imagination to think of it. Her throat still dry, she managed to half whisper at him. Do you hate me? Why do you want to hurt me? Do you hate girls? I don't hate girls, he blazed. I hate me. Out here in space, I found it out. You're not a person. Girls aren't people. They are soft and pretty and cute and cuddly and warm, but they have no feelings. I was handsome before my face spoiled, but that didn't matter. I always knew that girls weren't people. They're something like robots. They have all the power in the world and none of the worry. Men have to obey. Men have to beg. Men have to suffer because they are built to suffer, and to be sorry, and to obey. All a girl has to do is smile her pretty smile, or to cross her pretty legs, and the man gives up everything he has ever wanted and fought for, just to be her slave. And then the girl. And at this point he got to screaming again, and a high, shrill shout. And then the girl gets to be a woman, and she has children. More girls to pester men. More men to be the victims of girls. More cruelty and more slaves. You're so cruel to me, VZ. You're so cruel that you don't even know you're cruel. If you'd known how I wanted you, you'd have suffered like a person. But you didn't suffer. You're a girl. Well, you're going to find out now. You will suffer, and then you will die. But you won't die until you know how men feel about women. Tala, she said, using the nickname they had so rarely used to him. Tala, that's not so. I never meant you to suffer. Of course you didn't, he snapped. Girls don't know what they do. That's what makes them girls. They're worse than snakes. Worse than machines. He was mad, crazy mad, in the outer deep of space. He stood up so suddenly that he shot through the air and had to catch himself on the ceiling. A noise in the side of the cabin made them both turn for a moment. Trace was trying to break loose from his bonds. It did no good. VZ flung herself toward Trace, but Talatashar caught her by the shoulder. He twisted her around. His eyes blazed at her out of his poor, misshapen face. VZ had sometime wondered what death would be like. She thought, this is it. Her body still fought Talatashar, there in the spaceboat cabin. Trace groaned behind his shackles and his gag. She tried to scratch at Talatashar's eyes, but the thought of death made her seem far away inside herself. inside herself where other people could not reach, ever, no matter what happened. Out of that deep, nearby remoteness, words came into her head. Lady, if a man tries to bother you, you can think blue, count 2, and look for a red shoe. Thinking blue was not hard. She just imagined the yellow cabin lights turning blue. Counting 1, 2 was the simplest thing in the world. And even with Talatashar straining to catch her free hand, she managed to remember the beautiful, beautiful red shoes which she had seen in Marcia and the Moon Men. The lights dimmed momentarily, and a huge voice roared at them from the control board. Emergency! Top emergency! People! People out of repair! Talatashar was so astonished that he let her go. The board whined at them like a siren. It sounded as though the computer had become flooded with weeping. In an utterly different voice from his impassioned, talkative rage, Talatashar looked directly at her and asked very soberly, "Your cube. Didn't I get your cube too?" There was a knocking on the wall. A knocking from the millions of miles of emptiness outside. A knocking out of nowhere. A person they had never seen before stepped into the ship, walking through the double wall as though it had been nothing more than a streamer of mist. It was a man. A middle-aged man, sharp of face, strong in torso and limbs, clad in very old-style clothes. In his belt he had a whole collection of weapons, and in his hand a whip. "You there," said the stranger to Talatashar. "Untie that man." He gestured with the whip butt toward Trace, still bound and gagged. Talatashar got over his surprise. "You're a cube, Ghost. You're not real." The whip hissed in the air, and a long red welt appeared on Talatashar's wrist. The drops of blood began to float beside him in the air before he could speak again. Veezy could say nothing. Her mind and body seemed to be blanking out. As she sank to the floor, she saw Talatashar shake himself, walk over to Trace, and begin untying the knots. When Talatashar got the gag out of Trace's mouth, Trace spoke, not to him, but to the stranger. "Who are you?" "I do not exist," said the stranger, "but I can kill you, any of you, if I wish. You had better do as I say. Listen carefully. You too," he added, turning halfway around and looking at Veezy. "You listen too, because it's you who called me." All three listened. The fight was gone out of them. Trace rubbed his wrists and shook his hands to get the circulation going in them again.
Forgot to use the speed.
The stranger turned, in courtly and elegant fashion, so that he spoke most directly to Talatashar. "I derive from the young lady's cube. Did you notice the lights dim? Tyga Bayless left a false cube in her freeze box, but he hid me in the ship. When she thought the key notions at me, there was a fraction of a microvolt which called for more power at my terminals. I am made from the brain of some small animal, but I bear the personality and the strength of Tyga Bayless. I shall last 1 billion years. When the current came on full power, I became operative as a distortion in your minds. I do not exist," said he, specifically addressing himself to Talatashar. "But if I needed to take out my imaginary pistol and to shoot you in the head with it, my control is so strong that your bone would comply with my command. The hole would appear in your head, and your blood and your brains would pour out, just as much as blood is pouring from your hand just now. Look at your hand and believe me, if you wish." Talatashar refused to look. The stranger went on, in a very deliberate tone. "No bullet would come from my pistol. No ray, no blast, nothing. Nothing at all. But your flesh would believe me, even if your thoughts did not. Your bone structure would believe me, whether you thought so or not. I am communicating to every separate single cell in your body, to everything which I feel to be alive. If I think bullet at you, your bone will pull aside for the imaginary wound. Your skin will part. Your blood will pour out. Your brains will splash. They will not do it by physical force, but by communication from me. Communication direct, you fool. That may not be real violence, but it serves my purpose just as well. Now, do you understand me? Look at your wrist. Talantashar did not divert his eyes from the stranger. In an odd, cold voice he said, I believe you. I guess I am crazy. Are you going to kill me? I don't know, said the stranger. Trace said, Please, are you a person or machine? I don't know, said the stranger to him, too. What's your name? Asked Veezy. Did you get a name when they made you and sent you with us? My name, said the stranger with a bow to her, is Shazan. Glad to meet you, Shazan, said Trace, holding out his own hand. They shook hands. I felt your hand, said Trace. He looked at the other two in amazement. I felt his hand, I really did. What were you doing out in space all this time? The stranger smiled. I have work to do, not talk to make. What do you want us to do? Said Talantashar, now that you've taken over. I haven't taken over, said Shazan, and you will do what you have to do. Isn't that the nature of people? But please, said Veezy. The stranger had vanished, and the three of them were alone in the spaceboat cabin again. Trace's gag and bindings had finally drifted down to the carpet, but Tala's blood hung gently in the air beside him. Very heavily, Talantashar spoke. Well, we're through that. Would you say I was crazy? Crazy? Said Veezy. I don't know the word. Damaged in the thinking, explained Trace to her. Turning to Talantashar, he began to speak seriously. I think that... He was interrupted by the control board. Little bells rang and a sign lighted up. They all saw it. Visitors expected, said the glowing sign. The storage door opened and a beautiful woman came into the cabin with them. She looked at them as though she knew them all. Veezy and Trace were inquisitive and startled, but Talantashar turned white. Dead white. 5. Veezy saw that the woman wore a dress of the style which had vanished a generation ago. A style now seen only in the story boxes. There was no back to it. The lady had a bold, cosmetic design fanning out from her spinal column. In front, the dress hung from the usual magnet tabs, which had been inserted into the shallow, fatty area of the chest. But in her case, the tabs were above the clavicles, so that the dress rose high, with an air of old-fashioned prudishness. Magnet tabs were at the usual place just below the ribcage, holding the half-skirt, which was very full, in a wide sweep of unpressed pleats. The lady wore a necklace and matching bracelet of off-world coral. The lady did not even look at Veezy. She went straight to Talantashar and spoke to him with peremptory love. Tal, be a good boy. You've been bad. Mama, gasped Talantashar. Mama, you're dead. Don't argue with me, she snapped. Be a good boy. Take care of the little girl. Where is the little girl? She looked around and saw Veezy. That little girl, she added. Be a good boy to that little girl. If you don't, you will break your mother's heart. You will ruin your mother's life. You will break your mother's heart just like your father did. Don't make me tell you twice. She leaned over and kissed him on the forehead, and it seemed to Veezy that both sides of the man's face were equally twisted for that moment. She stood up, looked around, nodded politely at Trace and Veezy, and walked back into the storage room, closing the door after her. Talantashar plunged after her, opening the door with a bang and shutting it with a slam. Trace called after him. Don't stay in there too long, you'll freeze. Trace added, speaking to Veezy. This is something your cube is doing. That Shazan, he's the most powerful warden I ever saw. Your psychological guard must have been a genius. And you know what's the matter with him? He nodded at the closed door. He told me once, just in general. His own mother raised him. He was born in the asteroid belt, and she didn't turn him in. You mean his very own mother? Said Veezy. Yes, his genealogical mother, said Trace. How dirty, said Veezy. I never heard of anything like it. Talatashar came back into the room and said nothing to either of them. The mother did not reappear. But Shassan, the eidetic man imprinted in the cube, continued to assert his authority over all three of them. 3 days later, Marcia herself appeared, talked to Veezy for half an hour about her adventures with the Moon Men, and then disappeared again. Marcia never pretended that she was real. She was too pretty to be real. A thick cascade of yellow hair crowned a well-formed head, dark eyebrows arched over vivid brown eyes, and an enchantingly mischievous smile pleased Veezy, Trace, and Talatashar. Marcia admitted that she was the imaginary heroine of a dramatic series from the story boxes. Talatashar had calmed down completely after the apparition of Shassan followed by that of his mother. He seemed anxious to get to the bottom of the phenomena. He tried to do it by asking Marcia. She answered his questions willingly. "What are you?" he demanded. The friendly smile on the good side of his face was more frightening than a scowl would have been. "I'm a little girl, silly," said Marcia. "But you're not real," he insisted. "No," she admitted. "But are you?" She laughed a happy, girlish laugh, the teenager tying up the bewildered adult in his own paradox. "Look," he persisted, "you know what I mean. You're just something that Veezy saw in the story boxes, and you've come to give her imaginary red shoes." "You can feel the shoes after I've left," said Marcia. "That means the cube has made them out of something on this ship," said Talatashar, very triumphantly. "Why not?" said Marcia. "I don't know about ships. I guess he does." "But even if the shoes are real, you're not," said Talatashar. "Where do you go when you leave us?" "I don't know," said Marcia. "I came here to visit Veezy. When I go away, I suppose that I will be where I was before I came." "And where was that?" "Nowhere," said Marcia, looking solid and real. "Nowhere. So you admit you're nothing." "I will if you want me to," said Marcia. "But this conversation doesn't make much sense to me. What were you before you were here?" "Here? You mean in this boat?" "I was on Earth," said Talatashar. "Before you were in this universe, where were you?" "I wasn't born, so I didn't exist." "Well," said Marcia, "it's the same with me, only a little bit different. Before I existed, I didn't exist. When I exist, I'm here. I'm an echo out of Veezy's personality, and I'm helping her to remember that she is a pretty young girl. I feel as real as you feel, so there." Marcia went back to talking about her adventures with the Moon Men, and Veezy was fascinated to hear all the things they had to leave out of the storybox version. When Marcia was through, she shook hands with the two men, gave Veezy a little peck of a kiss on her left cheek, and walked through the hull into the gnawing emptiness of space, marked only by the starless rhomboids of the sails, which cut off part of the heavens from view. Talatashar pounded his fist in his other open hand. "Science has gone too far. They will kill us with their precautions." Trace said, deadly calm. "And what might you have done?" Talatashar fell into a gloomy silence. "And on the 10th day after the apparitions began, they ended. The power of the cube drew itself into a whole thunderbolt of decision. Apparently the cube and the ship's computers had somehow filled in each other's data. The person who came in this time was a space captain, gray, wrinkled, erect, tanned by the radiation of 1,000 worlds. "You know who I am," he said. "Yes, sir, a captain," said Veezy. "I don't know you," said Talatashar, "and I'm not sure I believe in you." "Has your hand healed?" asked the captain grimly. Talatashar fell silent. The captain called them to attention. "Listen, you are not going to live long enough to get to the stars on your present course. I want Trace to set the macrochronography for intervals of 95 years. And then I want to watch while he gives 2 of you at a time 5 years on watch. That will do to set the sails, check the tangling of the pod lines, and send out report beacons. This ship should have a sailor, but there is not enough equipment to turn one of you into a sailor. So, we'll have to take a chance on the robot controls while all three of you sleep in your freeze beds. Your sailor died of a blood clot, and the robots pushed him out of the cabin before they woke you. Trace winced.
Jesus.
I thought he had committed suicide. Not a bit, said the captain. Now listen. You'll get through in about 3 sleeps if you obey orders. If you don't, you'll never get there. It doesn't matter about me, said Talatashar, but this little girl has got to get to Werold Shemmering while she still has some life. One of your blasted apparitions told me to take care of her, but the idea is a good one, anyhow. Me too, said Trace. I didn't realize that she was just a kid until I saw her talking to that other kid, Marcia. Maybe I'll have a daughter like her someday. The captain said nothing to these comments, but gave them the full, happy smile of an old, wise man. An hour later, they were through with the checkup of the boat. The 3 were ready to go to their separate freeze beds. The captain was getting ready to make his farewell. Talatashar spoke up. Sir, I can't help asking it, but who are you? A captain, said the captain promptly.
Dark damage.
You know what I mean, said Tala wearily. The captain seemed to be looking inside himself. I am a temporary artificial personality created out of your minds by the personality which you call Shasan. Shasan is on the ship, but hidden from you, so that you will do him no harm. Shasan was imprinted with the personality of a man, a real man, by the name of Taiga Bayless. Shasan was also imprinted with the personalities of 5 or 6 good space officers, just in case those skills might be needed. A small amount of static electricity keeps Shasan on the alert, and when he is in the right position, he has a triggering mechanism which can call for more current from the ship's supply. But what is he? What are you? Talatashar kept on, almost pleading. I was about to commit a terrible crime, and you ghosts came in and saved me. Are you imaginary? Are you real? That's philosophy. I'm made by science. I wouldn't know, said the captain. Please, said Veezy, could you tell us what it seems like to you? Not what it is, what it seems like. The captain sagged, as though the discipline had gone out of him, as though he suddenly felt terribly old. When I'm talking and doing things, I suppose that I feel about like any other space captain. If I stop to think about it, I find myself pretty upsetting. I know that I'm just an echo in your minds, combined with the experience and wisdom which has gone into the cube. So, I guess that I do what real people do. I just don't think about it very much. I mind my business. He stiffened and straightened and was himself again. My own business, he repeated. And Shasan, said Trace, how do you feel about him? A look of awe, almost a look of terror, came upon the captain's face. He? Oh, him. The tone of wonder enriched his voice and made it echo in the small cabin of the spaceboat. Shasan. He is the thinker of all thinking, the to-be of being, the doer of doings. He is powerful beyond your strongest imagination. He makes me come living out of your living minds. In fact, said the captain with a final snarl, he is a dead mouse brain laminated with plastic, and I have no idea at all of who I am. Good night to you all. The captain set his cap on his head and walked straight through the hull. Veezy ran to a viewpoint, but there was nothing outside the ship. Nothing. Certainly no captain. What can we do? Said Talatashar. But obey. They obeyed. They climbed into their freeze beds. Talatashar attached the correct electrodes to Veezy and to Trace before he went to his bed and attached his own. They called to each other pleasantly as the lids came down. They slept. 6. At destination, the people of Werold Shemmering did the ingathering of pods, sails, and ship themselves. They did not wake the sleepers till they had them all assured of safety on the ground. They woke the 3 cabin mates together. BZ, Trace, and Talatashar were so busy answering questions about the dead sailor, about the repaired sails, and about their problems on the trip, that they did not have time to talk to each other. VZ saw that Talatashar seemed to be very handsome. The port doctors had done something to restore his face, so that he seemed a strangely dignified young old man. At last, Trace had a chance to talk to her. "Goodbye, kid," he said. "Go to school for a while here and then find yourself a good man." "I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" she said, a terrible fear rising within her. "For smooching around with you before that trouble came. You're just a kid, but you're a good kid." He ran his fingers through her hair, turned on his heel, and was gone. She stood, utterly forlorn, in the middle of the room. She wished that she could weep. What use had she been on the trip? Talatashar came up to her unnoticed. He held out his hand. She took it. "Give it time, child," said he. "Is it child again?" she thought to herself. To him, she said politely, "Maybe we'll see each other again. This is a pretty small world." His face lit up in an oddly agreeable smile. It made such a wonderful difference for the paralysis to be gone from one side. He did not look old at all. Not really old. His voice took on urgency. "VZ, remember that I remember. I remember what almost happened. I remember what we thought we saw. Maybe we did see all those things. We won't see them on the ground. But I want you to remember this. You saved us all. Me too. And Trace. And the 30,000 out behind." "Me?" she said. "What did I do?" "You tuned in help. You let Shassan work. It all came through you. If you hadn't been honest and kind and friendly, if you hadn't been terribly intelligent, no cube could have worked. That wasn't any dead mouse working miracles on us. It was your mind and your own goodness that saved us. The cube just added the sound effects. I tell you, if you hadn't been along, 2 dead men would be sailing off into the big nothing, with 30,000 spoiling bodies trailing along behind. You saved us all. You may not know how you did it, but you did." An official tapped him on the arm. Tala said, firmly but politely to him, "Just a moment." "That's it, I guess," he said to her. A contrary spirit seized her. She had to speak, though she risked unhappiness by talking. "And what you said about girls, then, that time?" "I remember it." His face twisted almost back to its old ugliness for a moment. "I remember it, but I was wrong. Wrong." She looked at him, and she thought in her own mind about the blue sky, about the 2 doors behind them, and about the red shoes in her luggage. Nothing miraculous happened. No Shassan, no voices, no magic cubes. Except that he turned around, came back to her and said, "Look, let's make sure that we see each other next week. These people at the desk can tell us where we are going to be so that we'll find each other. Let's pester them." Together, they went to the immigration desk. The colonel came back from the nothing at all.
Okay.
1.
That was story number 1. Okay, so yeah, next I said I was gonna do Flowers for Algernon. Just give me a second. Where the hell was that fucking... Did I not go far enough down? I know there was a merchant somewhere. I guess I totally fucking missed it. Okay. That's fucking... What? I don't give a shit about that. Aha, here we go. Flowers for Algernon. Yeah, this is an hour and 10 minutes, so... Yeah. Oh.
It's difficult, as you all by now realize, for me to hand off Hugo as convinced as I am that in any 1 year...
Screw you, Asimov.
March 5, 19... Listen, when you find out how I did it...
I just skipped the intro. Don't worry about it.
I want to do it again. for Algernon. Note, much of the story is written in a semi-literate style with frequent misspelling, which we will not attempt to reproduce here. Progress Report 1, March 5, 1965. Dr. Strauss says I should write down what I think and everything that happens to me from now on. I don't know why, but he says it's important, so they will see if they will use me. I hope they use me. Miss Kenyon says maybe they can make me smart. I want to be smart. My name is Charlie Gordon. I am 37 years old. I have nothing more to write now, so I will close for today. Progress Report 2, March 6.
How the hell did I miss that?
I had a test today. I think I failed it. And I think maybe now they won't use me. What happened is a nice young man was in the room, and he had some white cards and ink spilled all over them. He said, "Charlie, what do you see on this card?" I was very scared, even though I had my rabbit's foot in my pocket, because when I was a kid, I always failed tests in school and I spilled ink too. I told him I saw an ink blot. He said yes, and it made me feel good. I thought that was all, but when I got up to go, he said, "Charlie, we are not through yet."
There you
And I
go.
don't remember so good, but he wanted me to say what was in the ink.
Nice.
I didn't see nothing in the ink, but he said there was pictures there. Other people saw some pictures. I couldn't see any pictures. I really tried. I held the card close up and then
$5
far
off.
away. Then I said, if I had my glasses, I could see better. I usually only wear my glasses in the movies or TV, but I said they're in the closet in the hall. I got them. Then I said, let me see that card again. I bet I'll find it now. I tried hard, but I only saw the ink.
Nope.
I told him
Wrong
maybe
button.
I need new glasses. He wrote something down on a paper, and I got scared of failing a test. I told him it was a very nice ink blot with little points all around the edges. He looked very sad, so that wasn't it. I said, please let me try again. I'll get it in a few minutes because I'm not so fast sometimes. I'm a slow reader too in Miss Kinnion's class for slow adults, but I'm trying very hard. He gave me a chance with another card that had two kinds of ink spilled on it, red and blue. He was very nice and talked slow like Miss Kinnion does, and he explained to me that it was a raw shot. He said people see things in the ink. I said, show me
Let's go
where.
something faster.
He said, think. I told him, I think an ink blot, but that wasn't right either. He says, what does it remind you? Pretend something. I closed my eyes for a long time to pretend. I told him I pretend a fountain pen with ink leaking all over a tablecloth. I don't think I passed the raw shot test. Progress Report 3, March 7. Dr. Strauss and Dr. Niemer say it don't matter about the ink blots. They say that maybe they will still use me. I said Miss Kinnion never gave me tests like that one, only spelling and reading. They said Miss Kinnion told that I was her bestest pupil in the adult night school because I tried the hardest and I really wanted to learn. They said, how come you went to the adult night school all by yourself, Charlie? How did you find it? I said I asked people and somebody told me where I should go to learn to read and spell good. They said, why did you want to? I told them because all my life I wanted to be smart and not dumb. But it's very hard to be smart. They said, you know, it will probably be temporary. I said, yes. Miss Kinnion told me. I don't care if it hurts. Later, I had more crazy tests today. The nice lady who gave it to me told me the name, and I asked her, how do you spell it so I can write it in my progress report? Idiomatic apperception test. I don't know the first two words, but I know what test means. You got to pass it, or you get bad marks. This test looked easy because I could see the picture. Only this time she didn't want me to tell her the picture. That mixed me up. She said make up stories about the people in the picture. I told her, how can you tell stories about people you never met? was silly. I guess I failed that test too. Later, some men in white coats took me to a different part of the hospital and gave me a game to play. It was like a race with a white mouse. They called the mouse Algernon. Algernon was in a box with a lot of twists and turns like all kinds of walls, and they gave me a pencil and a paper with lines and lots of boxes. On one side it said start, and on the other end it said finish. They said it was a maze, and that Algernon and me had the same maze to do. I didn't see how we could have the same maze if Algernon had a box and I had a paper, but I didn't say nothing. Anyway, there wasn't time because the race started. One of the men had a watch he was trying to hide so I wouldn't see it, so I tried not to look, and that made me nervous. Anyway, that test made me feel worse than all the others because they did it over 10 times with different mazes, and Algernon won every time. I didn't know that mice were so smart. Maybe that's because Algernon is a white mouse. Maybe white mice are smarter than other mice. Progress Report 4, March 8th. They're going to use me. I'm so excited I can hardly write. Dr. Niemer and Dr. Strauss had an argument about it first. Dr. Niemer was in the office when Dr. Strauss brought me in. Dr. Niemer was worried about using me, but Dr. Strauss told him Miss Kinnian recommended me the best from all the people who she was teaching. I like Miss Kinnian because she's a very smart teacher. And she said, Charlie, you're going to have a second chance. If you volunteer for this experiment, you might get smart.
Bye.
They don't know if it will be permanent, but there's a chance. That's why I said okay, even when I was scared because she said it was an operation. She said, don't be scared, Charlie. You've done so much with so little. I think you deserve it most of all. So I got scared. And Dr. Niemer and Dr. Strauss argued about it. Dr. Strauss said I had something that was very good. He said I had a good motivation. I never even knew I had that. I felt proud when he said that not everybody with an IQ of 68 had that thing. I don't know what it is or where I got it, but he said Algernon had it too. Algernon's motivation is the cheese they put in his box. But it can't be that because I didn't eat any cheese this week. Then he told Dr. Niemer something I didn't understand, so while they were talking I wrote down some of the words. He said, Dr. Niemer, I know Charlie is not what you had in mind as the first of your new breed of intellect, couldn't get the word, Superman. But most people of his low ment are host and unco-op. They are usually dull, apath, and hard to reach. He has a good nature, he's interested and eager to please. Dr. Niemer said, remember, he will be the first human being ever to have his intelligence tripled by surgical means. Dr. Strauss said, exactly. Look at how well he's learned to read and write. For his low mental age, it's as great an achievement as you and I learning Einstein's theory of relativity without help. That shows the intense motivation. It compares a tremendous achievement. I say we use Charlie. I didn't get all the words, but it sounded like Dr. Strauss was on my side and like the other one wasn't. When Dr. Niemer nodded, he said, all right, maybe you're right. We will use Charlie. When he said that, I got so excited I jumped up and shook his hand for being so good to me. I told him, thank you, Doc. You won't be sorry for giving me a second chance. And I mean it like I told him. After the operation, I'm going to try to be smart. I'm going to try awful hard. Progress Report 5, March 10. I'm scared. Lots of the nurses and the people who gave me the test came to bring me candy and wish me luck. I hope I have luck. I got my rabbit's foot and my lucky penny. Only a black cat crossed me when I was coming to the hospital. Dr. Strauss says, don't be superstitious, Charlie. This is science. Anyway, I'm keeping and he said maybe. If the operation works, I'll show that mouse I can be as smart as he is. Maybe smarter. Then I'll be able to read better, spell the words good, and know lots of things and be like other people. I want to be smart like other people. If it works permanent, they will make everybody smart all over the world. They didn't give me anything to eat this morning. I don't know what that eating has to do with getting smart. I'm very hungry. And Dr. Niemer took away my box of candy. That Dr. Niemer is a grouch. Dr. Strauss says I can have it back after the operation. You can't eat before operation. Progress Report 6, March 15. The operation didn't hurt. He did it while I was sleeping. They took off the bandages from my head today so I can make a progress report. Dr. Niemer, who looked at some of my other ones, says I spelled progress wrong and told me how to spell it and report too. I get to try and remember that. I have a very bad memory for spelling. Dr. Strauss says it's okay to tell about all the things that happened to me, but he says I should tell more about what I feel and what I think. When I told him I don't know how to think, he said, try. All the time when the bandages were on my eyes, I tried to think. Nothing happened. I don't know what to think about. Maybe if I ask him, he'll tell me how I can think now that I'm supposed to get smart. What do smart people think about? Fancy things, I suppose. I wish I knew some fancy things already. Progress Report 7, March 19th. Nothing is happening. I had lots of tests and different kinds of races with Algernon. I hate that mouse. He always beats me. Dr. Strauss says I got to play those games, and he said sometime I got to take those tests over again. Those ink blots are stupid. And those pictures are stupid too. I like to draw a picture of a man and a woman, but I won't make up lies about people. I got a headache from trying to think so much. I thought Dr. Strauss was my friend, but he don't help me. He don't tell me what to think or when I'll get smart. Miss Kenyon didn't come to see me. I think writing these progress reports is stupid too. Progress Report 8, March 23rd.
Jesus fucking Christ.
I'm going back to work at the factory. They said it was better I should go back to work, but I can't tell anyone what the operation was. And I have to come to the hospital for an hour every night after work. They're going to pay me money every month for learning to be smart. I'm glad I'm going back to work because I miss my job and all my friends and all the fun we have there. Dr. Strauss says I should keep writing things down, but I don't have to do it every day, just when I think of something or something special happens. He says don't get discouraged because it takes time and it happens slow. He says it took a long time with Algernon before he got 3 times smarter than he was before. That's why Algernon beats me all the time, because he had that operation too. That makes me feel better. I could probably do that amazed faster than a regular mouse. Maybe someday I'll beat him. That would be something. So far, Algernon looks smart permanent. March 25th. I don't have to write progress report on top anymore, just when I hand it in once a week for Dr. Niemer. I just have to put the date on. That saves time. We had a lot of fun at the factory today. Joe Clark said, hey, look where Charlie had his operation. What did they do, Charlie? Put some brains in? I was going to tell him, but I remember Dr. Strauss said no. Then Frank Riley said, what did you do, Charlie? Forget your key and open your door the hard way? That made me laugh. They're really my friends and they like me. Sometimes somebody will say, hey, look at Joe or Frank or George. He really pulled a Charlie Gordon. I don't know why they say that, but they always laugh. This morning, Amos Ford, who is the foreman at Donegan's, used my name when he shouted at Ernie, the office boy. Ernie lost a package. He said, Ernie, for God's sake, what are you trying to be, a Charlie Gordon? I don't understand why he said that. March 28th. Dr. Strauss came to my room to television, but it wasn't. He said, I got to turn it on when I go to sleep. I said, you're kidding. Why should I turn it on when I'm going to sleep? Who ever heard of a thing like that? But he said, if I want to get smart, I got to do what he says. I told him I didn't think I was going to get smart. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and said, Charlie, you don't know it yet, but you're getting smarter all the time. You won't notice for a while. I think he was just being nice to make me feel good because I don't look any smarter. Oh yes, I almost forgot. I asked him when I can go back to the class at Miss Kennyon's school. He said, I won't go there. He said that soon Miss Kenyon will come to the hospital to start and teach me special. March 29th. That crazy TV kept up all night. How can I sleep with something yelling crazy things all night in my ears? And then many pictures. Wow. I don't know what it says when I'm up, so how am I going to know when I'm sleeping? Dr. Strauss says it's okay. He says my brains are learning when I sleep, and that will help me when Miss Kenyon starts my lessons in the hospital. Only I found out it isn't a hospital, it's a laboratory. I think it's all crazy. If you can get smart when you're sleeping, why do people go to school?
Interesting.
That thing I don't think will work. I used to watch The Late Show and The Late Late Show on TV all the time, and it never made me smart. Maybe you have to sleep while you watch it. Progress Report 9, April 3rd. Dr. Strauss showed me how to keep the TV turned low so now I can sleep. I don't hear a thing. And I still don't understand what it says. A few times I play it over in the morning to find out what I learned when I was sleeping, and I don't think so. Miss Kenyon says maybe it's another language, but most times it sounds American. It talks faster than even Miss Gould, who was my teacher in 6th grade. I told Dr. Strauss, what good is it to get smart in my sleep? I want to be smart when I'm awake. He says it's the same thing, and I have two minds. There's the subconscious and the conscious, and one don't tell the other one what it's doing. They don't even talk to each other. That's why I dream. But boy, have I been having crazy dreams. Wow. Ever since that night TV, The Late 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 Show. I forgot to ask him if it was only me or if everybody had those two minds. I just looked up the word in the dictionary Dr. Strauss gave me. The word is subconscious adjective of the nature of mental operations yet not present in consciousness as subconscious conflict of desires. There's more, but I still don't know what it means. This isn't a very good dictionary for dumb people like me. Anyway, the headache is from my party. My friends from the factory, Joe Carp and Frank Riley, invited me to go to Muggsy's saloon for some drinks. I don't like to drink, but they said we would have lots of fun. I had a good time. Joe Carp said I should show the girls how I mop out the toilet in the factory, and he got me a mop. I showed them, and everyone laughed when I told that Mr. Donegan said I was the best janitor he ever had because I liked my job, and do it good, and never miss a day, except for my operation. I said Miss Kenyon always said, Charlie, be proud of your job because you do it good. Everybody laughed, and we had a good time, and they gave me lots of drinks, and Joe said, Charlie is a card when he's potted. I don't know what that means, but everybody likes me, and we have fun. I can't wait to be smart like my best friends Joe Carp and Frank Riley. I don't remember how the party was over, but I think I went out to buy a newspaper and coffee for Joe and Frank, and when I came back there was no one there. I looked for them all over till late, and I don't remember so good, but I think I got sleepy or sick. A nice cop brought me back home. That's what my landlady, Mrs. Flynn, says. But I got a headache and a big lump in my head. I think maybe I fell, but Joe Carp says it was the cop. They beat up drunks sometimes. I don't think so. Miss Kenyon says cops are to help people. Anyway, I got a bad headache, and I'm sick and hurt all over. sister told me. Then the second time I lost because I got so excited I fell off the chair before I finished. But after that I beat him 8 more times. Well, I must be getting smart to beat a smart mouse like Algernon.
Oh.
But I don't feel smarter. I wanted to race Algernon some more, but Bert said that's enough for one day. They let me hold him for a minute. He's not so bad. He's soft like a ball of cotton. He blinks. And when he opens his eyes, they're black and pink on the edges. I said, can I feed him? Because I felt bad to beat him. And I wanted to be nice and make friends. Bert said, no, Algernon is a very special mouse with an operation like mine, and he was the first of all the animals to stay smart so long. He told me, Algernon is so smart that every day he has to solve a test to get his food. It's a thing like a lock on a door that changes every time Algernon goes in to eat, so he has to learn something new to get his food. That made me sad, because if he couldn't learn, he would be hungry. I don't think it's right to make you pass a test to eat. How would Dr. Niemer like it to have to pass a test every time he wants to eat? I think I'll be friends with Algernon. April 9. Tonight after work, Miss Kenyon was at the laboratory. She looked like she was glad to see me, but scared. I told her, don't worry, Miss Kenyon. I'm not smart yet. And she laughed. She said, I have confidence in you, Charlie. The way you struggle so hard to read and write better than all the others. At worst, you'll have it for a little while, and you're doing something for science. We're reading a very hard book. It's called Robinson Crusoe, about a man who gets marooned on a desert island. He's smart and figures out all kinds of things so he can have a house, food, and he's a good swimmer. Only I feel sorry because he's all alone and has no friends. But I think there must be somebody else on the island because there's a picture with this funny umbrella looking at footprint. I hope he gets a friend and not be lonely. April 10th. Miss Kenyon teaches me to spell better. She says, look at a word, and close your eyes, and say it over and over until you remember. I have lots of trouble with flu, that you say flu, and enough, and tough, that you don't say enu and two. You got to say enough and tough. That's how I used to write it before I started to get smart. I'm confused, but Miss Kenyon says there's no reason in spelling. April 14th. Finished Robinson Crusoe. I want to find out more about what happens to him, but Miss Kenyon says that's all there is. Why? April 15th. Miss Kenyon says I'm learning fast. She read some of the progress reports and she looked at me kind of funny. She says I'm a fine person and I'll show them all. I asked her why. She said, never mind, but I shouldn't feel bad if I find out everybody isn't nice like I think. She said for a person who God gave so little to, you've done more than a lot of people with brains they never even used. I said all my friends are smart people, but they're good. They like me and they never did anything that wasn't nice. Then she got something in her eye and she had to run out to the ladies' room. April 16th. Today I learned the comma. This is a comma. A period with a tail. Miss Kenyon says it's important because it makes writing better. She said somebody could lose a lot of money if a comma isn't in the right place.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't have any money. And I don't see how a comma keeps you from losing it. April 17th. I used the comma wrong. It's punctuation. Miss Kenyon told me to look up long words in the dictionary to learn to spell them. I said, what's the difference if you can read it anyway? She said it's part of your education, so now on, I look up all the words I'm not sure how to spell. It takes a long time to write that way. But I only have to look up once, and after that I get it right. You got to mix them up. She showed me how to mix them. And now, I can mix up all kinds of punctuation in my writing.
Ooh.
There are lots of rules to learn, but I'm getting them in my head. One thing I like about Dear Miss Kenyon, that's the way it goes in a business letter if I ever go into business, is she didn't even understand what she was talking about. I read the grammar book last night that explains the whole thing. Then I saw it was the same way as Miss Kenyon was trying to tell me, but I didn't get it. Miss Kenyon said that the TV working in my sleep helped out. She and I reached a plateau. It's a flat hill. After I figured out how punctuation worked, I read over all my old progress reports from the beginning. Boy, did I have crazy spelling and punctuation. I told Miss Kenyon I ought to go over the pages and fix all the mistakes, but she said, no, Charlie, Dr. Niemer wants them just as they are. That's why he lets you keep them, after they were photostated, to see your own progress. You're coming along fast, Charlie. That made me feel good. After the lesson, I went down and played with Algernon. We don't race anymore. April 20. I feel sick inside. Not sick like for a doctor, but inside my chest it feels empty, like getting punched and a heartburn at the same time. I wasn't going to write about it, but I guess I got to because it's important. Today was the first time I ever stayed home from work. Last night, Joe Carp and Frank Riley invited me to a party. There were lots of girls and some men from the factory. I remembered how sick I got last time I drank so much, so I told Joe I didn't want anything to drink. He gave me a plain Coke instead. We had a lot of fun for a while. Joe said I should dance with Ellen, and she would teach me the steps. I fell a few times, but I couldn't understand why, because no one else was dancing besides Ellen and me. All the time I was tripping because somebody's foot was always sticking out. Then when I got up, I saw the look on Joe's face, and it gave me a funny feeling in my stomach. He's a scream, one of the girls said. Everybody was laughing. Look at him, he's blushing. Charlie is blushing. Hey, Ellen, what'd you do to Charlie? I never saw him act like that before. I didn't know what to do or where to turn. Everyone was looking at me and laughing, and I felt naked. I wanted to hide. I ran outside and I threw up. Then I walked home. The funny thing, I never knew that Joe and Frank and the others liked to have me around all the time to make fun of me. Now I know what it means when they say to pull a Charlie Gordon. I'm ashamed. Progress Report 11, April 21st. Still didn't go to the factory. I told Mrs. Flynn, my landlady, to call and tell Mr. Donegan I was sick. Mrs. Flynn looks at me very funny lately, like she's scared. I think it's a good thing about finding out how everybody laughs at me. I thought about it a lot. Because I'm so dumb. I don't even know when I'm doing something dumb. People think it's funny when a dumb person can't do things the same way they can. Anyway, now I know I'm getting smarter every day. I know punctuation and I can spell good. I like to look up all the hard words in the dictionary, and I remember them. I'm reading a lot now, and Miss Kenyon says I read very fast. Sometimes I even understand what I'm reading about, and it stays in my mind. There are times when I can close my eyes and think of a page, and it all comes back like a picture. Besides history, geography, and arithmetic, Miss Kenyon said I should start to learn foreign languages. Dr. Strauss gave me some more tapes to play while I sleep. I still don't understand how that conscious and unconscious mind works, but Dr. Strauss says not to worry yet. He asked me to promise that when I start learning college subjects next week, I wouldn't read any books on psychology. That is, until he gives me permission. I feel a lot better today, but I guess I'm still a little angry that all the time people were laughing and making fun of me because I wasn't so smart. When I become intelligent, like Dr. Strauss says, the 3 times my IQ of 68, then maybe I'll be like everybody else. People will like me. I'm not sure what an IQ is. Dr. Niemer said it was something that measured how intelligent you were, like a scale in a drugstore weighs pounds. But Dr. Strauss had a big argument with him and said an IQ didn't weigh intelligence at all. He said an IQ showed how much intelligence you could get, like the numbers on the outside of a measuring cup. You still had to fill the cup up with stuff. Then when I asked Bert, who gives me my intelligence tests and works with Algernon, he said that both of them were wrong. Only I had to promise not to tell them he said so. Bert says that the IQ measures a lot of different things, including some of the things you've learned already, and it really isn't any good at all. So I still don't know what IQ is, soon. I didn't want to say anything, but I don't see how. They don't know what it is or where it is. I don't see how they know how much of it you've got. Dr. Niemer says I have to take a Rorschach test tomorrow. I wonder what that is. April 22nd. I found out what a Rorschach is. It's the test I took before the operation. The one with the ink blots on the pieces of cardboard. I was scared to death of those ink blots. I knew the man was going to ask me to find the pictures, and I knew I couldn't. I was thinking to myself, if only there was some way of knowing what kind of pictures were hidden there. Maybe there weren't any pictures at all. Maybe it was just a trick to see if I was dumb enough to look for something that wasn't there. Just thinking about that made me sore at him. All right, Charlie, he said. You've seen these cards before, remember? Of course I remember. The way I said it, he knew I was angry, and he looked surprised. Yes, of course. Now I want you to look at this. What might this be? What do you see on this card? People see all sorts of things in these ink blots. Tell me what it might be for you. What it makes you think of? I was shocked. That wasn't what I'd expected him to say. You mean there are no pictures hidden in those ink blots? He frowned and took off his glasses. What? Pictures hidden in the ink blots. Last time you told me everyone could see them and you wanted me to find them too. He explained to me that the last time he had used almost the exact same words he was using now. I didn't believe it. I still have a suspicion that he misled me at the time just for the fun of it. Unless, I don't know anymore. Could I have been that feeble-minded? We went through the cards slowly. One looked like a pair of bats tugging at something. Another one looked like two men fencing with swords. I imagined all sorts of things. I guess I got carried away. But I didn't trust him anymore, and I kept turning them around, even looking on the back to see if there was anything there I was supposed to catch. While he was making his notes, I peeked out the corner of my eye to read it. But it was all in code that looked like this. WF plus A, DDF dash add ridge, WF dash A, SF plus ouch. That still doesn't make sense to me. It seems to me that anyone could make up lies about things they didn't really imagine. Maybe I'll understand it when Dr. Strauss lets me read up on psychology. April 25th. I figured out a new way to line up the machines in the factory. Mr. Donegan says it'll save him $10,000 a year in labor and increase production. He gave me a $25 bonus. I wanted to take Joe Clark and Frank Riley out to lunch to celebrate. But Joe said he had to buy some things for his wife, and Frank said he was meeting his cousin for lunch. I guess it'll take a little time for them to get used to the changes in me. Everybody seems to be frightened of me. When I went over to Amos Borg and tapped him, he jumped up in the air. People don't talk to me much anymore, kid around the way they used to. It makes the job kind of lonely. April 27th. I got up the nerve today to ask Miss Kinnian to have dinner with me tomorrow night to celebrate my bonus. At first, she wasn't sure it was right, but I asked Dr. Strauss, and he said it was okay. Dr. Strauss and Dr. Niemer don't seem to be getting along so well. They're arguing all the time. This evening I heard them shouting. Dr. Niemer was saying that it was his experiment and his research. Dr. Strauss shouted back that he contributed just as much because he found me through Miss Kinnian and he performed the operation.
Jesus fucking Christ!
Dr. Strauss said that someday thousands of neurosurgeons might be using his technique all over the world. Dr. Niemer wanted to publish the results of the experiment at the end of this month. Dr. Strauss wanted to wait a while to be sure.
The fuck?
Dr. Strauss said Dr. Niemer was more interested in the chair of psychology at Princeton than he was in the experiment. Dr. Niemer said Dr. Strauss was nothing but an opportunist trying to ride to glory on his coattails. When I left afterwards, I found myself trembling. I don't know why for sure, but it was as if I'd seen both men clearly for the first time. I remember hearing Bert say, what it takes normal people to do in a lifetime. That's what makes it so amazing. You're like a giant sponge now, soaking things in. Facts, figures, general knowledge. Soon, you'll begin to connect them too. You'll see how different branches of learning are related. There are many levels, Charlie, like steps on a giant ladder that take you up higher and higher to see more and more of the world around you.
Oh.
I can see only a little bit of that, Charlie, and I won't go much higher than I am now. But you'll keep climbing up and see more and more. Each step will open new worlds that you never knew even existed. She frowned.
Now come on.
I just hope to God. What? Never mind, Charles.
Jesus.
I just hope I wasn't wrong
Christ.
to advise you to go into this in the first place. I laughed. How could that be? It worked, didn't it? Even Algernon is still smart. We sat there silently for a while, and I knew what she was thinking about as she watched me toying with the chain of my rabbit's foot and my keys. I didn't want to think of that possibility any more than elderly people want to think of death. I knew that this was only the beginning. I knew what she meant about levels because I'd seen some of them already. The thought of leaving her behind made me sad. I'm in love with Miss Gideon. Progress Report 12, April 30th. I've quit my job with Donegan's Plastic Box Company. Mr. Donegan insisted it would be better for all concerned if I left. What did I do to make them hate me so? The first I knew of it was when Mr. Donegan showed me the petition. 800 names. Everyone in the factory except Fanny Gurdon. Scanning the list quickly, I saw at once that hers was the only missing name. All the rest demanded that I be fired. Joe Carp and Frank Riley wouldn't talk to me about it. No one else would either except Fanny. She was one of the few people I'd known who set her mind to something and believed it no matter what the rest of the world proved, said, or did. And Fanny did not believe that I should have been fired. She had been against the petition on principle, and despite the pressure and threats, she'd held out. Which don't mean to say, she remarked, that I don't think there's something mighty strange about you, Charlie. Them changes. I don't know. You used to be a good, dependable, ordinary man. Not too bright, maybe, but honest. Who knows what you've done to yourself to get smart all of a sudden? Like everybody around here's been saying, Charlie, it's not right. But how can you say that, Fanny? What's wrong with a man becoming intelligent and wanting to acquire knowledge and understanding of the world around him? She stared down at her work and I turned to leave.
Fuck on.
Without looking at me, she said, "It was evil when Eve listened to the snake and ate from the tree of knowledge. It was evil when she saw that she was naked. If not for that, none of us would ever have to grow old and sick and die."
Hell.
Once again now I have the feeling of shame burning inside me. This intelligence has driven a wedge between me and all the people I once knew and loved.
Jesus fucking
Before,
Christ.
they laughed at me and despised me for my ignorance and dullness. Now they hate me for my knowledge and understanding. What in God's name do they want of me? They've driven me out of the factory. Now I'm more alone than ever before. May 15th. Dr. Strauss is very angry at me for not having written any progress reports in 2 weeks. He's justified, because the lab is now paying me a regular salary. I told him I was too busy thinking and reading. When I pointed out that writing was such a slow process that it made me impatient with my poor handwriting, he suggested I learn to type. It's much easier to write now because I can type 75 words a minute. Dr. Strauss continually reminds me of the need to speak and write simply so people will be able to understand me. I'll try to review all the things that happened to me during the last 2 weeks. Algernon and I were presented to the American Psychological Association, sitting in convention with the World Psychological Association. We created quite a sensation. Dr. Niemer and Dr. Strauss were proud of us. I suspect that Dr. Niemer, who is 60, 10 years older than Dr. Strauss, finds it necessary to see tangible results of his work. Undoubtedly, the result of pressure by Mrs. Niemer. Contrary to my earlier impressions of him, I realize that Dr. Niemer is not at all a genius. He has a very good mind, but it struggles under the specter of self-doubt. He wants people to take him for a genius. Therefore, it is important for him to feel that his work is accepted to the world. I believe that Dr. Niemer was afraid of further delay because he worried narrow specialization. The broader aspects of background were neglected far more than necessary, even for a neurosurgeon. I was shocked to learn the only ancient languages he could read were Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, and that he knows almost nothing of mathematics beyond the elementary levels of the calculus of variations. But when he admitted this to me, I found myself almost annoyed. It was as if he'd hidden this part of himself in order to deceive me, pretending, as do many people I've discovered, to be what he is not. No one I've ever known is what he appears to be on the surface. Dr. Niemer appears to be uncomfortable around me. Sometimes when I try to talk to him, he just looks at me strangely and turns away. I was angry at first when Dr. Strauss told me I was giving Dr. Niemer an inferiority complex. I thought he was mocking me, and I'm oversensitive at being made fun of. How was I to know that a highly respected psycho-experimentalist like Niemer was unacquainted with Hindustani and Chinese? It's absurd when you consider the work that's being done in India and China today in the very field of his study. I asked Dr. Strauss how Niemer could refute Bahajimati's attack on his method if Niemer couldn't even read them in the first place. That strange look on Strauss's face can mean only one of two things. Either he doesn't want to tell Niemer what they're saying in India, or else, and this worries me, Dr. Strauss doesn't know either. I must be careful to speak and write clearly and simply so people won't laugh. May 18th. I'm very disturbed. I saw Miss Kinnian last night for the first time in over a week. I tried to avoid all discussions of intellectual concepts and to keep the conversation on a simple, everyday level. But she just stared at me blankly and asked me what I meant about the mathematical variance equivalent in Doberman's fifth concerto. When I tried to explain, she stopped me and laughed. I guess I got angry, but I suspect I'm approaching her on the wrong level. No matter what I try to discuss with her, I'm unable to communicate. I must review Rorschach's equations on levels of semantic progression. I find I don't communicate with people much anymore. Thank God for books and music and things I can think about. I am alone at Mrs. Flynn's boarding house most of the time and seldom speak to anyone. May 20th. I would not have noticed the new dishwasher, a boy of about 16 at the corner diner when I take my evening meals if not for the incident of the broken dishes. They crashed to the floor, sending bits of white china under the tables. The boy stood there dazed and frightened, holding the empty tray in his hand. The cat calls from the customers, cries of, "Hey, there go the prophets, Mazel tov," and, well, he didn't work here very long, which invariably seems to follow the breaking of glass or dishware in a public restroom. All seemed to confuse him. When the owner came to see what the excitement was about, the boy cowered as if he expected to be struck. All right, you dope," shouted the owner. "Don't just stand there, get the broom and sweep that mess up. A broom, you idiot! It's in the kitchen." The boy saw that he was not going to be punished. His frightened expression disappeared, and he smiled as he came back with the broom to sweep the floor.
Oh.
A few of the rowdier customers kept up the remarks, amusing themselves at his expense. "Here, sonny, over here, there's a nice piece behind you." "He's not so dumb. It's easier to break him than wash him." As his vacant eyes moved across the crowd of onlookers, he slowly mirrored their smiles, and finally broke into an uncertain grin at the joke he obviously did not understand. I felt sick inside, but I looked at his dull, vacuous smile, the wide, bright eyes of a child, uncertain but eager to please. They were laughing at him because he was mentally retarded. I had been laughing at him too. Suddenly I was furious at myself, and all those who were smirking at him. I jumped up and shouted, "Shut up! Leave him alone! It's not his fault he can't understand, he can't help what he is, but he's still a human being." The room grew silent. I cursed myself for losing control. I tried not to look at the boy as I walked out without touching my food. I felt ashamed for both of us. How strange that people of honest feelings and sensibility, who would not take advantage of a man born without arms or eyes, how such people think of abusing a man born with low intelligence. It infuriated me to think that not too long ago I had foolishly played the clown, and I had almost forgotten. I'd hidden the picture of the old Charlie Gordon from myself
Slow and
because now
steady,
that I was intelligent, it was something that had to be pushed out of my unknowingly I joined with them in laughing at myself. That hurts most of all. I have often reread my progress reports and seen the illiteracy, the childish naivete, the mind of low intelligence peering from a dark room through the keyhole at the dazzling light outside. I see that even in my dullness I knew I was inferior, but that other people had something I lacked, something denied me. In my mental blindness, I thought it was somehow connected with the ability to read and write. If I was sure that I could get those skills, I would automatically have intelligence too. Even a feeble-minded man wants to be like other men. The child may not know how to feed itself or what to eat, yet it knows of hunger. This, then, is what I was like. I never knew. Even with my gift of intellectual awareness, I never really knew. This day was good for me. Seeing the past more clearly, I've decided to use my knowledge and skills to work in the field of increasing human intelligence levels. Who's better equipped for this work? Who else has lived in both worlds? These are my people. Let me use my gift to do something for them. Tomorrow, I will discuss with Dr. Strauss how I can work in this area. I may be able to help him work out the problems of widespread use of the technique which was used on me. I have several good ideas of my own. There is so much that might be done with this technique. If I could be made into a genius, what about thousands of others like myself? What fantastic levels might be achieved by using this technique on normal people, on geniuses? There are so many doors to open. I'm impatient to begin. Progress Report 13, May 23rd. It happened today. Algernon bit me. I visited the lab to see him, as I occasionally do. When I took him out of his cage, he snapped at my hand. I put him back and watched him for a while. He was unusually disturbed and vicious. May 24th. Bert, who is in charge of the experimental animals, tells me that Algernon is changing. He is less cooperative. He refuses to run the maze anymore. General motivation has decreased. He hasn't been eating. Everyone is upset about what this may mean. May 25th. They've been feeding Algernon, who now refuses to work the shifting lock problem. Everyone identifies me with Algernon. In a way, we're both the first of our kind. They're all pretending that Algernon's behavior is not necessarily significant for me. But it's hard to hide the fact that some of the other animals who were used in this experiment are showing strange behavior. Dr. Strauss and Dr. Niemer have asked me not to come to the lab anymore. I know what they're thinking, but I can't accept it. I'm going ahead with my plans to carry their research forward. With all due respect to both these fine scientists, I'm well aware of their limitations. If there is an answer, I'll have to find it out for myself. Suddenly, time has become very important to me. May 29th. I've been given a lab of my own and permission to go ahead with the research. I'm on to something. Working day and night. I've had a cot moved into the lab. Most of my writing time is spent on the notes which I keep in a separate folder. But from time to time I feel it necessary to put down my moods and thoughts from sheer habit. I find the calculus of intelligence to be a fascinating study. Here is the place for the application of all the knowledge I have acquired. May 31st. Dr. Strauss thinks I'm working too hard. Dr. Niemer says I'm trying to cram a lifetime of research and thought into a few weeks. I know I should rest, but I'm driven on by something inside that won't let me stop. I've got to find the reason for the sharp regression in Algernon. I've got to know if and when it will happen to me. June 4th. Letter to Dr. Strauss. Copy. Dear Dr. Strauss, under separate cover, I'm sending you a copy of my report entitled The Algernon-Gordon Effect, the study of structure and function of increased intelligence, which I would like to have published. As you see, my experiments are completed. I've included in my report all of my formulae, as well as mathematical analysis in the appendix. Of course, these should be verified. Because of its importance to both you and Dr. Niemer, and need I say to myself too, I have checked and rechecked my results a dozen times in the hope of finding an error. Sorry to say, the results must stand. Yet, for the sake of science, I am grateful for the little bit that I here add to the knowledge of the function of the human mind and to the laws governing the artificial increase in human intelligence. I recall your once saying to me that an experiment
damn it! Stop making these fucking levels so fucking big!
I know now that this is true. I'm sorry, however, that my own contribution to the field must rest upon the ashes of the work of two men I regard so highly. Yours truly, Charles Gordon. June 5th. I must not become emotional. The facts and the results of my experiments are clear, and the more sensational aspects of my own rapid climb cannot obscure the fact that the tripling of intelligence by the surgical technique developed by Drs. Strauss and Niemer must be viewed as having little or no practical applicability at the present time to be the increase of human intelligence. As I review the records and data on Algernon, I see that although he is still in his physical infancy, he has regressed mentally. Motor activity is impaired. There's a general reduction of glandular activity. There is an accelerated loss of coordination. There are also strong indications of progressive amnesia. As will be seen by my report, these and other physical and mental deterioration syndromes can be predicted with significant results by the application of my formula. The surgical stimulus to which we were both subjected has resulted in an intensification and acceleration of all mental processes. The unforeseen development, which I have taken the liberty of calling the Algernon-Gordon effect, is the logical extension of the entire intelligence speed-up. The hypothesis here proven may be described simply in the following terms. Artificially increased intelligence deteriorates at a rate of time directly proportional to the quantity of the increase. I feel that this in itself is an important discovery. As long as I'm able to write, I will continue to record my thoughts in these progress reports. It's one of my few pleasures. However, by all indications, my own mental deterioration will be very rapid. I have already begun to notice signs of emotional instability and forgetfulness, the first symptoms of the burnout. June 10th. Deterioration progressing. I have become absent-minded. Algernon died 2 days ago. Dissection shows my predictions were right. His brain decreased in weight. There was a general smoothing out of cerebral convolutions, as well as a deepening and broadening of brain fissures. I guess the same thing is, or will soon be happening to me. Now that it's definite. I don't want it to happen. I put Algernon's body in a cheese box and buried him in the backyard. I cried. June 15th. Dr. Strauss came to see me again. I wouldn't open the door and I told him to go away. I want to be left to myself. Touchy, irritable. I feel the darkness closing in. It's hard to throw off thoughts of suicide. I keep telling myself how important this journal will be. It's a strange sensation to pick up a book you enjoyed just a few months ago and discover you don't remember it. I remembered how great I thought John Milton was. But when I picked up Paradise Lost, I couldn't understand it at all. I got so angry, I threw the book across the room. I've got to try to hold on to some of it. Some of the things I've learned. Oh God, please don't take it all away. June 19th. Sometimes at night I go out for a walk. Last night I couldn't remember where I lived. A policeman took me home. I have the strange feeling that this has all happened to me before, a long time ago. I keep telling myself I'm the only person in the world who can describe what's happening to me. June 21st. Why can't I remember? I've got to fight. I lie in bed for days and I don't know who or where I am. Then it all comes back to me in a flash. Fugues of amnesia. Symptoms of senility. Back in childhood. I can watch them coming on. It's so cruelly logical. I learned so much and so fast. Now my mind is deteriorating rapidly. I won't let it happen. I'll fight it. I can't help thinking of the boy in the restroom. The blank expression. The silly smile. The people laughing at him. No, please. Not that again. June 22nd. I'm forgetting things that I learned recently. It seems to be following the classic pattern. The last things learned are the first things forgotten. Or is that the pattern? Let's look it up again. I reread my paper on the Algernon-Gordon effect, and I get the strange feeling that it was written by someone else.
Come on.
There are parts I don't even understand. Motor activity impaired. I feel I'm moving slower and slower. I had a terrible shock today. I picked up a copy of an article I used in my research. Krieger's Überphysische Anzeige. See if it would help me understand what I've done. First I thought there was something wrong with my eyes. Then I realized I could no longer read German. I tested myself in other languages. All gone. June 30th. A week since I dared to write again. It's slipping away like sand through my fingers. Most of the books I have are too hard for me now. I get angry with them because I know that I read and understood them just a few weeks ago. I keep telling myself I must keep writing these reports so that somebody will know what's happening to me. But it gets harder to form the words and remember spellings. I have to look up even simple words in the dictionary now, and it makes me impatient with myself. Dr. Strauss comes around almost every day, but I told him I wouldn't see or speak to anybody. He feels guilty. They all do. But I don't blame anyone. I knew what might happen. But how it hurts. July 7th. I don't know where the week went. Today is Sunday, I know, because I can see through my window people going to church. I think I stayed in bed all week, but I remember Mrs. Flynn bringing food to me a few times. I keep saying over and over, I've got to do something, but then I forget. And maybe it's just easier not to do what I say I'm going to do. I think of my mother and father a lot these days. I found a picture of them with me taken at a beach. My father has a big ball under his arm, and my mother's holding me by the hand. I don't remember them the way they are in the picture. All I remember is my father drunk most of the time, arguing with Mom about money. He never shaved much, and he used to scratch my face when he hugged me. My mother said he died, but Cousin Millie said he heard his dad say that my father ran away with another woman. When I asked my mother, she slapped me and said my father was dead. I don't think I ever found out the truth, but I don't care much. He said he was going to take me to see cows on a farm once, but he never did. He never kept his promises. July 10th. My landlady, Mrs. Flynn, is very worried about me. She says the way I lay around all day and don't do anything, I remind her of her son before she threw him out of the house. Said she doesn't like loafers. If I'm sick, it's one thing, but if I'm a loafer, that's another thing, and she won't have it. I told her I think I'm sick. I try to read a little bit every day, mostly stories. But sometimes I have to read the same thing over and over again because I don't know what it means. And it's hard to write. I know I should look up all the words in the dictionary, but it's so hard and I'm so tired all the time. Then I got the idea that I would use only the easy words instead of the long, hard ones. That saves time. I put flowers on Algernon's grave about once a week. Mrs. Flynn thinks I'm crazy to put flowers on a mouse's grave, but I told her that Algernon was special. July 14th. It's Sunday again. I don't have anything to do to keep me busy now because my television set is broken. I don't have any money to get it fixed. I think I lost this month's check from the lab. I don't remember. I get awful headaches, and aspirin doesn't help me much. Mrs. Flynn knows I'm really sick, and she feels very sorry for me. She's a wonderful woman whenever someone is sick. July 22nd. Mrs. Flynn called a strange doctor to see me. He was afraid I was going to die. I told the doctor I wasn't too sick, and I only forget sometimes. He asked me did I have any friends or relatives, and I said no, I don't have any. I told him I had a friend called Algernon once, that he was a mouse, and we used to run races together. He looked at me kind of funny, like he thought I was crazy. He smiled when I told him I used to be a genius. Talked to me like I was a baby, and he winked at Mrs. Flynn. I got mad and chased him out the
There we go.
July 25th.
Wow. So
I was looking
far this
at
has
some of
been.
my own progress reports, and it's very funny, but I can't read what I wrote.
Ugh. Fuck.
I can make out some of the words, but they don't make sense. Miss Kinnian came to the door, but I said, go away, I don't want to see you.
Come on,
She cried,
seriously?
I cried too, but I wouldn't let her in because I didn't want her to laugh at me. I told her I didn't like her anymore. I told her I didn't want to be smart anymore. That's not true. I still love her and I still want to be smart, but I had to say that so she'd go away. She gave Mrs. Flynn money to pay the rent. I don't want that. I got to get a job. Please let me not forget how to read and write. July 27th.
Fuck you.
Mr. Donegan was very nice when I came back and asked him for my old job of janitor. First he was very suspicious, but I told him what happened to me, and then he looked very sad and put his hand on my shoulder and said, Charlie Gordon, you got guts. Everybody looked at me when I came downstairs and started working in the toilet, sweeping it out like I used to. I told myself, Charlie, if they make fun of you, don't get sore, because you remember they're not so smart as you once thought they were. Besides, they were once your friends. And if they laughed at you, that doesn't mean anything because they liked you too. One of the new men who came to work there after I went away made a nasty crack. He said, hey, Charlie, I hear you're a very smart fella, a real quiz kid. Say something intelligent. I felt bad. But Joe Carp came over and grabbed him by the shirt and said, leave him alone, you lousy cracker, or I'll break your neck. I didn't expect Joe to take my part, so I guess he's really my friend. Later, Frank Riley came over and said, Charlie, if anybody bothers you or tries to take advantage, you call me or Joe and we will set them straight. I said, thanks, Frank. I got choked up, so I had to turn around and go into the supply room so he wouldn't see me cry. Good to have friends. July 28th. I did a dumb thing today. I forgot I wasn't in Miss Kinnian's class at the adult center anymore like I used to be. I went in and sat down on my old seat in the back of the room, and she looked at me funny and she said, Charles. I didn't remember she ever called me that before, only Charlie. So I said, hello, Miss Kinnian. I'm ready for my lesson today, only I lost my reader that we was using. She started to cry and run out of the room, and everybody looked at me. And I saw they wasn't the same people who used to be in my class. Then all of a sudden I remembered some things about the operation, me getting smart, and I said, holy smoke, I really pulled a Charlie Gordon that time. I went away before she came back to the room. That's why I'm going away from New York for good. I don't want to do nothing like that again. I don't want Miss Kinnian to feel sorry for me. Everybody feels sorry at the factory. And I don't want that either, so I'm going someplace where nobody knows that Charlie Gordon was once a genius, and I can't even read a book or write good. I'm taking a couple of books along, and even if I can't read them, I'll practice hard. Maybe I won't forget everything I learned. If I try real hard, maybe I'll be a little bit smarter than I was before the operation. I got my rabbit's foot, my lucky penny. Maybe they'll help me. If you ever read this, Miss Kinnian, don't be sorry for me. I'm glad I got a second chance to be smart because I learned a lot of things that I never even knew were in this world. And I'm grateful that I saw it all for a little bit. I don't know why I'm dumb again, or what I did wrong, because maybe I didn't try hard enough. But if I try and practice very hard, maybe I'll get a little smarter and know what all the words are. I remember a little bit how nice I had a feeling with the blue book that has the torn cover when I read that. That's why I'm going to try to keep on trying to get smart so I can have that feeling again. It's a good feeling to know things and be smart. I wish I had it right now. If I did, I'd sit down and read all the time. Anyway, I bet I'm the first dumb person in the world who ever found out something important for science. I remember I did something. I don't remember what. So I guess it's like I did it for all the dumb people like me. Goodbye, Miss Kinnian and Dr. Strauss and everybody. And P.S. Please tell Dr. Niemer such a grouch when people laugh at him, and he'd have more friends. It's easy to make friends if you let people laugh at you. I'm going to have lots of friends where I go. P.P.S. Please, if you get a chance, put some flowers on Algernon's grave in the backyard.
Oh, okay. That's the end of that story. Ugh. How long have I been doing this? Like 2 hours? Let's go with another one. Another short story. I think we'll go with some Philip K. Dick. I like Philip K. Dick. And this is an interesting short story. It's called The Mold of Yancy. Yeah. I won't explain. No need to explain. No need to explain. It's just a weird story, like Philip K. Dick usually writes.
The Mold of Yancy. Leon Sibling groaned and pushed away his work papers. In an organization of thousands, he was the only employee not putting out. Probably he was the only Yance man on Callisto not doing his job. Fear and the quick pluckings of desperation made him reach up and wave on the audio circuit to Babson, the overall office controller. "Say," Sibling said hoarsely, "I think I'm stuck bad.
There it is.
How about running the Gestalt through up to my spot? Maybe I can pick up the rhythm." He grinned weakly. The hum of other creative minds. After a speculative moment, Babson reached for the impulse synapsis, his massive face unsympathetic. "You holding up progress, Sip? This has to be integrated with the daily by 6 tonight. The schedule calls for the works to be on the vid lines during the dinner hour stretch." The visual side of the Gestalt had already begun to form on the wall screen.
Health, but nope.
Sibling turned his attention to it, grateful of a chance to escape Babson's cold glare. The screen showed a 3D of Yancy, the usual three-quarter view from the waist up. John Edward Yancy in his faded work shirt, sleeves rolled up, arms brown and furry. A middle-aged man in his late 50s, his face sunburned, neck slightly red, a good-natured smile on his face, squinting because he was looking into the sun. Behind Yancy was a still of his yard, his garage, his flower garden, lawn, the back of his neat little white plastic house.
Of course.
Yancy grinned at Sibling, the neighbor pausing in the middle of a summer day, perspiring from the heat and exertion of mowing his lawn, about to launch into a few harmless remarks about the weather, the state of the planet, the condition of the neighborhood. "Say," Yancy said in the audio phones propped up on Sibling's desk. His voice was low, personal. "The darndest thing happened to my grandson, Ralph, the other morning. You know how Ralph is. He's always getting to school half an hour early, says he likes to be in his seat before anybody else." "That eager beaver," Joe Pines at the next desk catcalled. From the screen, Yancy's voice rolled on, confident, amiable, undisturbed. Well, Ralph saw this squirrel. It was just sitting there on the sidewalk. He stopped for a minute and watched. The look on Yancy's face was so real that Sibling almost believed him. He could almost see the squirrel and the tow-headed youngest grandson of the Yancy family, the familiar child of the familiar son of the planet's most familiar and beloved person. This squirrel, Yancy explained in his homey way, was collecting nuts, and by golly, this was just the other day, only the middle of June. And here was this little squirrel. With his hands, he indicated the size, collecting these nuts and carrying them off for winter. And then the amused, anecdote look on Yancy's face faded. A serious, thoughtful look replaced it, the meaningful look. His blue eyes darkened, good color work. His jaw became switch by the android crew. Yancy seemed older, more solemn and mature, more impressive. Behind him, the garden scene had been jerked, and a slightly different backdrop filtered in. Yancy now stood firmly planted in a cosmic landscape, among mountains and winds and huge old forests. I got to thinking, Yancy said,
Damn it.
and his voice was deeper, slower. There was that little squirrel. How did he know winter was coming? There he was, working away, getting prepared for it. Yancy's voice rose, preparing for a winter he'd never seen. Sibling stiffened and prepared himself. It was coming. At his desk, Joe Pines grinned and yelled, "Get set!" That squirrel, Yancy said solemnly, had faith. No, he never saw any sign of winter, but he knew winter was coming. The firm jaw moved. One hand came slowly up. And then the image stopped. It froze immobile, silent. No words came from it. Abruptly, the sermon ended in the middle of a paragraph. "That's it," Babson said briskly, filtering the Yancy out. "Help you any?" Sibling pawed jerkily at his work papers. "No," he admitted. "Actually, it doesn't. But I'll get it worked out." "I hope so." Babson's face darkened ominously, and his small, mean eyes seemed to grow smaller. "What's the matter with you? Home problems?" "I'll be okay," Sibling muttered, sweating. "Thanks." On the screen, a faint impression of Yancy remained, still poised at the word coming. The rest of the gestalt was in Sibling's head. The continuing slice of words and gestures hadn't been worked out and fed to the composite. Sibling's contribution was missing, so the entire gestalt was stopped cold in its tracks. "Say," Joe Pines said uneasily, "I'll be glad to take over today. Cut your desk out of the circuit and I'll cut myself in." "Thanks," Sibling muttered, "but I'm the only one who can get this damn part. It's the central gem." "You ought to take a rest. You've been working too hard." "Yes," Sibling agreed on the verge of hysteria. "I'm a little under the weather."
Thank you.
That was obvious. Everybody in the office could see that. But only Sibling knew why. And he was fighting with all his strength to keep from screaming out the reason at the top of his lungs. Basic analysis of the political milieu at Callisto was laid out by Niplan computing apparatus at Washington, D.C. But the final evaluations were done by human technicians. The Washington computers could ascertain that the Callisto political structure was moving toward a totalitarian makeup, but they couldn't say what that indicated. Human beings were required to class the drift as malign. "It isn't possible," Taverner protested. "There's constant industrial traffic in and out of Callisto. Except for the Ganymede Syndicate, they've got out-planet commerce bottled up. We'd know as soon as anything phony got started." "How would we know?" Police Director Kelman inquired. Taverner indicated the data sheets, graphs, and charts of figures and percentages that covered the walls of the Niplan police offices. "It would show up in hundreds of ways. Terrorist raids, political prisons, extermination camps. We'd hear about political recanting, treason, disloyalty, all the basic props of a dictatorship." "Don't confuse a totalitarian society with a dictatorship," Kelman said dryly. "A totalitarian state reaches into every sphere of its citizens' lives, forms their opinions on every subject. The government can be a dictatorship, or a parliament, or
I'm not sure, Kelman admitted thoughtfully with a glance at the elaborate wall charts. But whatever it is, they're all beginning to turn out alike. Among its passengers, the Interplan commercial liner that settled down at Callisto carried Peter Taverner, his wife, and their 2 children. With a grimace of concern, Taverner made out the shapes of local officials waiting at the exit hatch. The passengers were going to be carefully screened. As the ramp descended, the clot of officials moved forward. Taverner got to his feet and collected his family. "Ignore them," he told Ruth. "Our papers will get us by." Expertly prepared documents identified him as a speculator in non-ferric metals, looking for a wholesale outlet to handle his jobbing. Callisto was a clearing point for land and mineral operations. A constant flood of wealth-hungry entrepreneurs streamed back and forth, carting raw materials from the underdeveloped moons, hauling mining equipment from the inner planets. Cautiously, Taverner arranged his topcoat over his arm. A heavy-set man in his middle 30s, he could have passed for a successful business operator. His double-breasted business suit was expensive but conservative. His big shoes were brightly shined. All things considered, he'd probably get by. As he and his family moved toward the exit ramp, they presented a perfect and exact imitation of the out-planet business class. "State your business," a green uniformed official demanded, pencil poised. ID tabs were being checked, photographed, recorded. Brain pattern comparisons were being made, the usual routine. "Non-ferric enterprises," Taverner began, but a second official cut him abruptly off. "You're the 3rd cop this morning. What's biting you people on Terra?" The official eyed Taverner intently. "We're getting more cops than ministers." Trying to maintain his poise, Taverner answered evenly, "I'm here to take a rest. Acute alcoholism. Nothing official." "That's what your cohort said." The official grinned humorously. "Well, what's one more Terran cop?" He slid the lock bars aside and waved Taverner and his family through. "Welcome to Callisto. Have fun. Enjoy yourselves. Fastest growing moon in the system." "Practically a planet," Taverner commented ironically. "Any day now." The official examined some reports. "According to our friends in your little organization, you've been pasting up wall graphs and charts about us. Are we that important?" "Academic interest," Taverner said. "If 3 spots had been made, then the whole team had been netted. The local authorities were obviously primed to detect infiltration." The realization chilled him. But they were letting him through. Were they that confident? Things didn't look good. Peering around for a cab, he grimly prepared to undertake the business of integrating the scattered team members into a functioning whole. That evening, at the stay-lit bar on the main street of the commercial district of town, Taverner met with his 2 team members. Hunched over their whiskey sours, they compared notes. "I've been here almost 12 hours, Ekman stated, gazing impassively at the rows of bottles in the gloomy depths of the bar. Cigar smoke hovered in the air. The automatic music box in the corner banged away metallically. "I've been walking around town looking at things, making observations." "Me," Dorser said. "I've been at the tape library, getting official myth, comparing it to Callisto reality, and talking to the scholars, educated people hanging around the scanning rooms." Taverner sipped his drink. "Anything of interest?" started knocking the authorities, complaining about the bus service, the sewage disposal, taxes, everything. They chimed right in heartily, no hesitation and no fear. The legal government, Dorser commented, is set up in the usual archaic fashion. Two-party system, one a little more conservative than the other. No fundamental difference, of course. But both elect candidates at open primaries, ballots circulated to all registered voters. A spasm of amusement touched him. This is a model democracy. I read the textbooks. Nothing but idealistic slogans, freedom of speech, assembly, religion, the works. Same old grammar school stuff. The three of them were temporarily silent. There are jails, Taverner said slowly. Every society has law violations. I visited one, Ekman said, belching. Petty thieves, murderers, claim jumpers, strong-arm hoods, the usual. No political prisoners? No. Ekman raised his voice. We might as well discuss this at the top of our lungs. Nobody cares. The authorities don't care. Probably after we're gone, they'll clap a few thousand people into prison, Dorser murmured thoughtfully. My God, Ekman retorted. People can leave Callisto anytime they want. If you're operating a police state, you have to keep your borders shut. And these borders are wide open. People pour in and out. Maybe it's a chemical in the drinking water, Dorser suggested. How the hell can they have a totalitarian society without terrorism? Ekman demanded rhetorically. I'll swear to it. There are no thought control cops here. There is absolutely no fear. Somehow, pressure is being exerted, Taverner persisted. Not by cops, Dorser said emphatically. Not by force and brutality. Not by illegal arrest and imprisonment and forced labor. If this were a police state, Ekman said thoughtfully, there'd be some kind of resistance movement. Some sort of subversive group trying to overthrow the authorities. But in this society, you're free to complain. You can buy time on the TV and radio stations. You can buy space in the newspapers, anything you want. He shrugged. So how can there be a clandestine resistance movement? It's silly. Nevertheless, Taverner said, these people are living in a one-party society with a party line, with an official ideology. They show the effects of a carefully controlled totalitarian state. They're guinea pigs, whether they realize it or not. Wouldn't they realize it? Baffled, Taverner shook his head.
Blah.
I would have thought so. There must be some mechanism we don't understand. It's all open. We can look everything over. We must be looking for the wrong thing. Idly, Taverner gazed at the television screen above the bar. The nude, girly song and dance routine had ended. Now the features of a man faded into view. A genial, round-faced man in his 50s, with guileless blue eyes, an almost childish twitch to his lips, a fringe of brown hair playing around his slightly prominent ears. Friends, the TV image rumbled. It's good to be with you again tonight. I thought I might have a little chat with you. A commercial, Dorser said, signaling the bartending machine for another drink. Who is that? Taverner asked curiously. That kindly-looking geezer? Ekman examined his notes. A sort of popular commentator, name of Yancy. Is he part of the government? Not that I know of. A kind of homespun philosopher. I picked up a biography of him on a magazine stand. Ekman passed the gaily colored pamphlet to his boss.
Bullshit.
Totally ordinary man as far as I can see. Used to be a soldier. In the Mars-Jupiter War, he distinguished himself, Battlefield Commission, rose to the rank of Major. He shrugged indifferently. The sort of talking almanac, pithy sayings on every topic, wise old saws how to cure a chest cold. What the trouble is back on Terra. Taverner examined the booklet. Yes, I saw his picture around. Very popular figures, loved by the masses. Man of the people speaks for them. When I was buying cigarettes, I noticed he endorses one particular brand. Very popular brand. Now, just about driven the others off the market. Same with beer. The scotch in this glass is probably the brand Yancy endorses. The same with tennis balls, only he doesn't play tennis. He plays croquet. All the time, every weekend. Accepting his fresh drink, Ekman finished. So now, everybody plays croquet. How can croquet be a planet-wide sport? Taverner demanded. This isn't a planet, Dorser put in. It's a pipsqueak moon. Not according to Yancy, Ekman said. We're supposed to think of Callisto as a planet. How? Taverner asked. Spiritually, it's a planet. Yancy likes people to take a spiritual view of matters. He's strong on God and honesty in government and being hard-working and clean-cut, warmed over truisms. The expression on Taverner's face hardened. Interesting, he murmured. I'll have to drop by and meet him. Why? He's the dullest, most mediocre man you could dream up. Maybe, Taverner answered. That's why I'm interested. Babson, huge and menacing, met Taverner at the entrance of the Yancy building. Of course you can meet Mr. Yancy, but he's a busy man. It'll take a while to squeeze in an appointment. Everybody wants to meet Mr. Yancy. Taverner was unimpressed. How long do I have to wait? As they crossed the main lobby to the elevators, Babson made a computation. Oh, say 4 months. 4 months? John Yancy is just about the most popular man alive. Around here, maybe. Taverner commented angrily as they entered the packed elevator. I never heard of him before. If he's got so much on the ball, why isn't he piped all around Niplan? Actually, Babson admitted in a hoarse, confidential whisper, I can't imagine what people see in Yancy. As far as I'm concerned, he's just a big bag of wind. But people around here enjoy him. After all, Callisto is provincial. Yancy appeals to a certain type of rural mind, to people who like their world simple. I'm afraid Terra would be too sophisticated for Yancy. Have you tried? Not yet, Babson said. Reflectively, he added, maybe later. While Taverner was pondering the meaning of the big man's words, the elevator ceased climbing. The two of them stepped off into a luxurious carpeted hall, illuminated by recessed lights. Babson pushed open a door and they entered a large, active office. Inside, a screening of a recent Yancy gestalt was in progress. A group of Yance men watched it silently, faces alert and critical. The gestalt showed Yancy sitting at his old-fashioned oak desk in his study. It was obvious that he had been working on some philosophical thoughts. Spread out over the desk were books and papers. On Yancy's face was a thoughtful expression. He sat with his hand against his forehead, features screwed up into a solemn study of concentration. This is for next Sunday morning, Babson explained. Yancy's lips moved, and he spoke. Friends, he began in his deep, personal, friendly, man-to-man voice. I've been sitting here at my desk, well, about the way you're sitting around your living rooms. A switch in camera work occurred. It showed the open door of Yancy's study. In the living room was the familiar figure of Yancy's sweet-faced, middle-aged, homey wife. She was sitting on the comfortable sofa, primly sewing. On the floor, their grandson Ralph played the familiar game of jacks. The family dog snoozed in the corner. One of the watching Yance men made a note on his pad. Taverner glanced at him curiously, baffled. Of course, I was in there with them. Yancy continued, smiling briefly. I was reading the funnies to Ralph. He was sitting on my knee. The background faded, and a momentary phantom scene of Yancy sitting with his grandson on his knee floated into being. Then the desk in the book-lined study returned. I'm mighty grateful for my family, Yancy revealed. In these times of stress, it's my family that I turn to as my pillar of strength. Another notation was made by a watching Yance man. Sitting here in my study this wonderful Sunday morning, Yancy rumbled on, I realize how lucky we are to be alive, and to have this lovely planet, and the fine cities and houses, all the things God has given us to enjoy. But we've got to be careful. We've got to make sure we don't lose these things. A change had come over Yancy. It seemed to Taverner that the image was subtly altering. It wasn't the same man. The good humor was gone. This was an older man, and larger. A firm-eyed father speaking to his children. My friends, Yancy intoned, there are forces that could weaken this planet. Everything we've built up for our loved ones, for our children, could be taken away from us overnight. We must learn to be vigilant. We must protect our liberties, our possessions, our way of life. If we become divided and fall to bickering among each other, we will be easy prey for our enemies. We must work together, my friends. That's what I've been thinking about this Sunday morning. Cooperation, teamwork. We've got to be secure. And to be secure, we must be one united people. That's the key, my friends. The key to a more abundant life. Pointing out the window at the lawn and garden, Yancy said, You know, The voice trailed off. The image froze. Full room lights came on, and the watching Yance men moved into muttering activity. Fine, one of them said. So far, at least, but where's the rest? Sibling again, another answered. His slice still hasn't come through. What's wrong with that guy? Scowling, Babson detached himself. Pardon me, he said to Taverner. I'll have to excuse myself. Technical matters. You're free to look around if you care to. Help yourself to any of the literature. Anything you want. Thanks,
Come on.
Taverner said uncertainly. He was confused. Everything seemed harmless, even trivial.
Where'd that
But something
potion go?
basic was wrong. Suspiciously, he began to prowl. It was obvious that John Yancy had pontificated on every known subject. A Yancy opinion on every conceivable topic was available. Modern art, or garlic in cooking, or the use of intoxicating beverages, or eating meat, or or socialism, or war, or education, or open front presses on women, or high taxes, or atheism, or divorce, or patriotism. Every shade and nuance of opinion possible. Was there any subject that Yancy hadn't expressed himself on? Taverner examined the voluminous tapes that lined the walls of the offices. Yancy's utterances had run into billions of tape feet. Could one man have an opinion on everything in the universe? Choosing a tape at random, he found himself being addressed on the topic of table manners. You know, the miniature Yancy began, his voice tinny in Taverner's ears. At dinner the other night, I happened to notice how my grandson, Ralph, was cutting his steak. Yancy grinned at the viewer as an image of the 6-year-old boy sawing grimly away floated briefly into sight. Well, I got to thinking. There was Ralph working away at that steak, not having any luck with it, and it seemed to me... Taverner snapped the tape off and returned it to the slot. Yancy had definite opinions on everything. Or were they so definite? A strange suspicion was growing in him. On some topics, yes. On minor issues, Yancy had exact rules, specific maxims drawn from mankind's rich storehouse of folklore. But major philosophical and political issues were something else again. Getting out one of the many tapes listed under war, Taverner ran it through at random. I'm against war, Yancy pronounced angrily, and I ought to know. I've done my share of fighting. There followed a montage of battle scenes. The Jupiter-Mars War, in which Yancy had distinguished himself by his bravery, his concern for his comrades, his hatred of the enemy, his variety of proper emotions. But, Yancy continued staunchly, I feel a planet must be strong. We must not surrender ourselves meekly. Weakness invites attack and fosters aggression. By being weak, we promote war. We must gird ourselves and protect those we love. With all my heart and soul, I'm against useless wars. But I say again, as I've said many times before, a man must come forward and fight a just war. He must not shrink from his responsibility. War is a terrible thing, but sometimes we must. As he restored the tape, Taverner wondered just what the hell Yancy had said. What were his views on war? They took up 100 separate reels of tape. Yancy was always ready to hold forth on such vital and grandiose subjects as war, the planet, God, taxation. But did he say anything? A cold chill crawled up Taverner's spine. On specific and trivial items, there were absolute opinions. Dogs are better than cats. Grapefruit is too sour without a dash of sugar. It's good to get up early in the morning. Too much drinking is bad. But on big topics, an empty vacuum, filled with a vacant roll of high-sounding phrases. A public that agreed with Yancy on war and taxes and God and planet agreed with absolutely nothing and with everything. On topics of importance, they had no opinion at all. They only thought they had an opinion. Rapidly, Taverner scanned tapes on various major subjects. It was the same all down the line. With one sentence, Yancy gave. With the next, he took away. The total effect was a neat cancellation, a skillful negation. But the viewer was left with the illusion of having consumed a rich and varied intellectual feast. It was amazing. And it was professional. The ends were tied up too slickly to be mere accident. Nobody was was as harmless and vapid as John Edward Yancy. He was just too damn good to be true. Sweating, Taverner left the main reference room and poked his way toward the rear offices, where busy Yance men worked away at their desks and assembly tables. Activity whirred on all sides. The expression on the faces around him was benign, harmless, almost bored. The same friendly, trivial expression that Yancy himself displayed. Harmless. And in its harmlessness, diabolical. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do. If people liked to listen to John Edward Yancy, if they wanted to model themselves after him, what could the Niplan police do about it? What crime was being committed? No wonder Babson didn't care if the police prowled around. No wonder the authorities had freely admitted them. There weren't any political jails of labor gangs or concentration camps. There didn't have to be. Torture chambers and extermination camps were needed only when persuasion failed. And persuasion was working perfectly. A police state ruled by terror came about when the totalitarian apparatus began to break down. The earlier totalitarian societies had been incomplete. The authorities hadn't really gotten into every sphere of life. But techniques of communication had improved. The first really successful totalitarian state was being realized before his eyes. Harmless and trivial, it emerged. And the last stage, nightmarish but perfectly logical, was when all the newborn boys were happily and voluntarily named John Edward. Why not? They already lived, acted, and thought like John Edward.
Rather.
And there was Mrs. Margaret Ellen Yancy for the women. She had her full range of opinions, too. She had her kitchen, her taste in clothes, her little recipes and advice for all the women to imitate. There were even Yancy children for the youth of the planet to imitate. The authorities hadn't overlooked anything. Babson strolled over, a genial expression on his face. "How's it going, officer?" He chuckled wetly, putting his hand on Taverner's shoulder. "Fine," Taverner managed to answer. He evaded the hand. "You like our little establishment?" There was genuine pride in Babson's thick voice. "We do a good job. An artistic job. We have real standards of excellence." Shaking with helpless anger, Taverner plunged out of the office and into the hall. The elevator took too long. Furiously, he turned toward the stairs. He had to get out of the Yancy building. He had to get away. From the shadows of the hall, a man appeared, face pale and taut. "Wait, can I talk to you?" Taverner pushed past him. "What do you want?" "You're from the Terran Niplan police. The man's Adam's apple bobbed. "I work here. My name's Sipling. Leon Sipling. I have to do something. I can't stand it anymore." "Nothing can be done," Taverner told him, "if they want to be like Yancy." "But there isn't any Yancy," Sipling broke in, his thin face twitching spasmodically. "We made him up. We invented him." Taverner halted. "You what?" "I've decided." Voice quavering excitedly, Sipling rushed on. "I'm going to do something, and I know exactly what." Catching hold of Taverner's sleeve, he grated, "You've got to help me. I can stop all this, but I can't do it alone." In Leon Sipling's attractive, well-furnished living room, the two of them sat drinking coffee and watching their children scramble around on the floor playing games. Sipling's wife and Ruth Taverner were in the kitchen drying the dishes. "Yancy is a synthesis," a sort of composite person. No such individual actually exists. We drew on basic prototypes from sociological records. We based the gestalt on various typical persons. So it's true to life, but we stripped off what we didn't want and intensified what we did want. Broodingly, he added, there could be a Yancy. There are a lot of Yancy-like people. In fact, that's the problem. You deliberately set out with the idea of remolding people along Yancy's line? Taverner inquired. I can't say precisely what the idea is at top level. I was an ad writer for a mouthwash company. The Callisto authorities hired me and outlined what they wanted me to do. I've had to guess as to the purpose of the project. By authorities, you mean the governing council? Sibling laughed sharply. I mean the trading syndicates that own this moon, lock, stock, and barrel. But we're not supposed to call it a moon. It's a planet. His lips twitched bitterly. Apparently the authorities have a big program built up. It involves absorbing their trade rivals on Ganymede. When that's done, they'll have the out planet sewed up tight. They can't get at Ganymede without open war, Taverner protested. The median companies have their own population behind them. And then it dawned. I see, he said softly. They'd actually start a war. It would be worth a war to them. You're damn right it would. And to start a war, they have to get the public lined up. Actually, the people here have nothing to gain. A war would wipe out all the small operators. It would concentrate power in fewer hands, and they're few enough already. To get the 80 million people here behind the war, they'd need an indifferent, sheep-like public. And they're getting that. When this Yancy campaign is finished, the people here on Callisto will accept anything. Yancy does all their thinking for them. He tells them how to wear their hair, what games to play. He tells the jokes the men repeat in their back rooms. His wife whips up the meal they all have for dinner. All over this little world, millions of duplicates of Yancy's day. Whatever he does, whatever he believes, we've been conditioning the public for 11 straight years. The important thing is the unvarying monotony of it. A whole generation is growing up looking to Yancy for an answer to everything. It's a big business then, Taverner observed. This project of creating and maintaining Yancy. Thousands of people are involved in just writing the material. You only saw the first stage, and it goes into every city. Tapes, films, books, magazines, posters, pamphlets, dramatic visual and audio shows, plants in the newspapers, sound trucks, kids' comic strips, word-of-mouth report, elaborate ads, the works. A steady stream of Yancy. Picking up a magazine from the coffee table, he indicated the lead article. How is John Yancy's heart? Raises the question of what we would do without Yancy. Next week, an article on Yancy's stomach. Acidly, Sibling finished. We know a million approaches. We turn it out of every pore. We're called Yansmen. It's a new art form. How do you, the core, feel about Yancy? He's a big sack of hot air. None of you was convinced. Even Babson has to laugh, and Babson is at the top. After him come the boys who sign the checks. God, if we ever started believing in Yancy, if we got started thinking that trash meant something. An expression of acute agony settled over Sibling's face. That's it. That's why I can't stand it. Why? Taverner asked, deeply curious. His throat mic was taking it all in, relaying it back to the Home Office at Washington. I'm interested in finding out why Sibling bent down and called his son. Mike, stop playing and come on over here. To Taverner, he explained, Mike's 9 years old. Yancy's been around as long as he's been alive. Mike came dully over. Yes, sir? What kind of marks do you get in school? His father asked. The boy's chest stuck out proudly. He was a clear-eyed little miniature of Leon Sibling. All A's and B's. He's a smart kid, Sibling said to Taverner. Good in arithmetic, geography, history, all that stuff. Turning to the boy, he said, I'm going to ask you some questions. I want this gentleman to hear your answers, okay? Yes, sir, the boy said obediently. His thin face grim, Sibling said to his son, I want to know what you think about war. You've been told about war in school. You know about all the famous wars in history, right? Yes, sir. We learned about the American Revolution, and the First Global War, and then the Second Global War, and then the First Hydrogen War, and the war between the colonists on Mars and Jupiter. To the schools, Sibling explained tightly to Taverner, we distribute Yancy material, educational subsidies in packet form. Yancy takes children through history, explains the meaning of it all. Yancy explains natural science. Yancy explains good posture and astronomy and every other thing in the universe. But I never thought my own son. His voice trailed off unhappily, then picked up life. So you know all about war. Okay, what do you think of war? Promptly the boy answered, war is bad. War is the most terrible thing there is. It almost destroyed mankind. Eyeing his son intently, Sibling demanded, did anybody tell you to say that? The boy faltered uncertainly. No, sir. You really believe those things? Yes, sir. It's true, isn't it? Isn't war bad? Sibling nodded. War is bad. But what about just wars? Without hesitation, the boy answered, we have to fight just wars, of course. Why? Well, we have to protect our way of life. Why? Again, there was no hesitation in the boy's ready answer. We can't let them walk over us, sir. That would encourage aggressive war. We can't permit a world of brute power. We have to have a world of... He searched for the exact word. A world of law. Wearily, half to himself, Sibling commented, I wrote those meaningless, contradictory words myself 8 years ago. Pulling himself together with a violent effort, he asked, so war is bad, but we have to fight just wars. Well, maybe this planet, Callisto, will get into a war with, let's pick Ganymede at random.
Just random.
He was unable to keep the harsh irony from his voice. Just at random. Now, we're at war with Ganymede. Is it a just war, or only a war? This time, there was no answer. The boy's smooth face was screwed up in a bewildered, struggling frown. No answer? Sibling inquired icily. Why, the boy faltered. I mean... He glanced up hopefully. When the time comes, won't somebody say? Sure, Sibling choked. Somebody will say. Maybe even Mr. Yancy. Relief flooded the boy's face. Yes, sir, Mr. Yancy will say. He retreated back toward the other children. Can I go now? As the boy scampered back to his game, Sibling turned miserably to Taverner. You know what game they're playing? It's called Hippo Hoppo. Guess whose grandson just loves it? Guess who invented the game? There was silence. What do you suggest? Taverner asked. You said you thought something could be done. on Sipling's face, a flash of deeply felt cunning. I know the project. I know how it can be pried apart. But somebody has to stand with a gun at the head of the authorities. In 9 years, I've come to see the essential key to the Yancy character. The key to the new type of person we're growing here. It's simple. It's the element that makes that person malleable enough to be led around. I'll bite, Taverner said patiently, hoping the line to Washington was good and clear. All Yancey's beliefs are insipid. The key is thinness. Every part of his ideology is diluted, nothing excessive. We've come as close as possible to no beliefs, you've noticed that. Wherever possible, we've canceled attitudes out, left the person apolitical, without a viewpoint. Sure, Taverner agreed, but with the illusion of a viewpoint. All aspects of personality have to be controlled. We want the total person. So a specific attitude has to exist for each concrete question. In every respect, our rule is, Yancy believes the least troublesome possibility, the most shallow, the simple, effortless view, the view that fails to go deep enough to stir any real thought. Taverner got the drift. Good, solid, lulling views. Excitedly, he hurried on. But if an extreme, original view got in, one that took real effort to work out, something that was hard to live, Yancy plays croquet, so everybody fools around with a mallet. Sipling's eyes gleamed. But suppose Yancy had a preference for Kriegspiel. For what? Chess played on 2 boards. Each player has his own board with a complete set of men. He never sees the other board. A moderator sees both. He tells each player when he's taken a piece or lost a piece, or moved into an occupied square, or made an impossible move, or checked or is in check himself. I see, Taverner said quickly. Each player tries to infer his opponent's location on the board. He plays blind. Lord, it would take every mental faculty possible. The Prussians taught their officers military strategy that way. It's more than a game. It's a cosmic wrestling match. What if Yancy sat down in the evening with his wife and grandson and played a nice, lively 6-hour game of Kriegspiel? Suppose his favorite books, instead of being Western gun-toting anachronisms, were Greek tragedy. Suppose his favorite piece of music was Bach's Art of the Fugue, not My Old Kentucky Home. I'm beginning to get the picture, Taverner said as calmly as possible. I think we can help. Babson squeaked once, but this is illegal. Absolutely, Taverner acknowledged. That's why we're here. He waved the squad of Nipland Secret Service men into the offices of the Yancy building, ignoring the stunned workers sitting bolt upright at their desks. Into his throat mic he said, "How's it coming with the big shots?" "Medium." Kelman's faint voice came, strengthened by the relay system between Callisto and Earth. Some slipped out of bounds to their various holdings, of course. But the majority never thought we'd taken action. You can't, Babson bleated, his great face hanging down in wattles of white dough. What have we done? What law? I think, Taverner interrupted, we can get you on purely commercial grounds alone. You've used the name Yancy to endorse various manufactured products. There's no such person. That's a violation of statutes governing ethical presentation of advertising. Babson's mouth closed with a snap, then slid feebly open. No such person. But everybody knows John Yancy. Why, he's... Stammering, gesturing, he finished. He's everywhere. Suddenly, a wretched little pistol appeared in his pulpy hand. He was waving it wildly as Dorser stepped up and quietly knocked it skidding across and collapsed into fumbling hysterics. Disgusted, Dorser clamped hand grapples around him. "Act like a man," he ordered. But there was no response. Babson was too far gone to hear him.
Yeah.
Satisfied, Taverner plunged off past the knot of stunned officials and workers into the inner offices of the project. Nodding curtly, Taverner made his way up to the desk, where Leon Sipling sat surrounded by his work. The first of the altered gestalts was already flickering through the scanner. Together, the two men stood watching it. "Well," Taverner said when it was done, "you're the judge." "I believe it'll do," Sipling answered nervously. "I hope we don't stir up too much. It's taken 11 years to build it up. We want to tear it down by degrees. Once the first crack is made, it should start swaying." Taverner moved toward the door. "Will you be all right on your own?" Sipling glanced at Ekman, who lounged at the end of the office, eyes fixed on the uneasily working Yance men. "I suppose so. Where are you going?" "I want to watch this as it's released. I want to be around when the public gets its first look at it." At the door, Taverner lingered. "It's going to be a big job for you, putting out the Gestalt on your own. You may not get much help for a while." Sipling indicated his co-workers. They were already beginning to pick up their tempo where they had left off. "They'll stay on the job," he disagreed, "as long as they get full salaries." Taverner walked thoughtfully across the hall to the elevator. A moment later, he was on his way downstairs. At a nearby street corner, a group of people had collected around a public vid screen, anticipating the late afternoon TV cast of John Edward Yancy. The Gestalt began in the regular way. There was no doubt about it. When Sipling wanted to, he could put together a good slice.
Whoa.
And in this case, he had done practically the whole pie. In rolled-up shirt sleeves and dirt-stained trousers, Yancy crouched in his garden, a trowel in one hand, straw hat pulled down over his eyes, grinning into the warm glare of the sun. It was so real that Taverner could hardly believe no such person existed. But he had watched Sipling's subcrews laboriously and expertly constructing the thing from the ground up. "Afternoon," Yancy rumbled genially. He wiped perspiration from his steaming, florid face and got stiffly to his feet. "Man," he admitted, "it's a hot day." He indicated a flat of primroses. "I was setting them out. Quite a job." So far, so good. The crowd watched impassively, taking their ideological nourishment without particular resistance. All over the moon, in every house, schoolroom, office, on each street corner, the same Gestalt was showing, and it would be shown again. "Yes," Yancy repeated, "it's really hot. Too hot for those primroses. They like shade." The fast pan-up showed he had carefully planted his primroses in the shadows at the base of his garage. On the other hand, Yancy continued in his smooth, good-natured, over-the-back fence conversational voice, "My dahlias need lots of sun." The camera leaped to show the dahlias blooming frantically in the blazing sunlight. Throwing himself down in a striped lawn chair, Yancy removed his straw hat and wiped his brow with a pocket handkerchief. "So," he continued genially, "if anybody asked me which is better, shade or sun, I'd have to reply it depends on whether you're a primrose or a dahlia." He grinned his famous, guileless, boyish grin into the cameras. "I guess I must be a primrose. I've had all was taking it in without complaint. An inauspicious beginning, but it was going to have long-term consequences, and Yancy was starting to develop them right now. His genial grin faded. That familiar look, that awaited serious frown showing that deep thoughts were coming, faded into place. Yancy was going to hold forth. Wisdom was on the way. But it was nothing ever uttered by him before. You know, Yancy said slowly, seriously, that makes a person do some thinking. Automatically he reached for his glass of gin and tonic, a glass which up until now would have contained beer. And the magazine beside it wasn't Dog Stories Monthly, it was the Journal of Psychological Review. The alteration of peripheral props would sink in subliminally. Right now, all conscious attention was riveted on Yancy's words. It occurs to me, Yancy orated as if the wisdom were fresh and brand new, arriving just now, that some people might maintain that, say, sunlight is good and shade is bad. But that's downright silly. Sunlight is good for roses and dahlias, but it would darn well finish off my fuchsias. The camera showed his ubiquitous prize fuchsias. Maybe you know people like that. They just don't understand that. And as was his custom, Yancy drew on folklore to make his point. That one man's meat, he stated profoundly, is another man's poison. Like, for instance, for breakfast, I like a couple of eggs done sunny side up. Maybe a few stewed prunes and a piece of toast.
Yeah.
But Margaret, she prefers a bowl of cereal. And Ralph, he won't take either. He likes flapjacks. And the fellow down the street, the one with the big front lawn, he likes a kidney pie and a bottle of stout. Taverner winced. Well, they would have to feel their way along. But still, the audience stood absorbing it, word after word. The first feeble stirrings of a radical idea.
Fucking stuck.
That each person
Damn it.
had a different set of values, a unique style of life. That each person might believe, enjoy, and approve of different things. It would take time, as Sipling said. The massive library of tapes would have to be replaced. Injunctions built up in each area would have to be broken down. A new type of thinking was being introduced, starting with a trite observation about primroses. When a 9-year-old boy wanted to find out if a war was just or unjust, he would have to inquire into his own mind. There would be no ready answer from Yancy. A gestalt was already being prepared on that, showing that every war had been called just by some, unjust by others. There was one gestalt Taverner wished he could see, but it wouldn't be around for a long time. It would have to wait. Yancy was going to change his taste in art, slowly but steadily. One of these days, the public would learn that Yancy no longer enjoyed pastoral calendar scenes. That now, he preferred the art of that 15th century Dutch master of macabre and diabolical horror, Hieronymus Bosch. Note, The Mold of Yancy, October 18th, 1954. If August 1955. Obviously, Yancy is based on President Eisenhower. During his reign, we were all worrying about the man in the gray flannel suit problem. We feared that the entire country was turning into one person and a whole lot of clones. Although in those days the word clone was unknown to us. I liked this story enough to use it as the basis for my novel, The Penultimate Truth. In particular, the part where everything the government tells tells you is a lie. I still like that part. I mean, I still believe it so. Watergate, of course, bore the basic idea of this story out. 1978. End note.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Ugh. Yeah, okay, I'll just play this out until I die. No more short stories, though. So, hey, if anybody actually liked that, fucking tell me what you thought. Fucking leave a comment or some bullshit. Fucking nobody fucking leaves comments, but that's okay. Hell, I barely talk, so why should they leave a comment? I shouldn't be killing this asshole. I should just be getting my fucking weapon and getting the fuck out of here. Well, transportation is fucking broken. You barely go anywhere, you piece of garbage. Yeah, holy shit. Jesus fuck. Yep, dead. Dead, dead, dead. My fucking god. Try transporting someplace like other than the fucking 2 places I've been. Huh? You cock. Oh, what's this do? Nothing. Gives me a magical rush. Ooh, magical rush. What you do? Nothing. Fucking my blood is thick. Awesome. That's exactly what I needed. What about you? Oh, awaken. Awaken, awaken. Take the lands that must be taken. Wow. Anyways, I'm pretty sure I've had enough of this. So yeah, I'll do this again some other day. I'll see everybody later.